What makes a movie a certain actor's movie? Take, for example, Back to the Future, a film that originally starred Eric Stoltz and completed a third of its principal photography before being fired and replaced by first choice Michael J. Fox. Would it now be wrong to call Back to the Future an Eric Stoltz film? It was true at one point, and the final cut features at least one shot of him when Marty punches Biff in Lou's Cafe. Thus, the answer is yes, but only if you call it by its preferred title, Some Kind of Wonderful. Other times, a film can be considered many different actors' movie. Let us examine, at complete random, two films from 1992, School Ties and Encino Man. The former could easily be interpreted as a Matt Damon or Chris O'Donnell movie, and the latter as Pauly Shore or Sean Astin's. Both are technically correct. The question we intend to answer with this episode of the Say Report, something I feel should be addressed before my host companion decides enough is enough with this sketch, is what makes a film something to be celebrated as part of an actor's body of work, or a podcast to honor said actor's History Month. Does the actor require top billing and a prominent place on the poster? Does the actor need to be credited for their appearance? Does the role need to represent a substantial part of the runtime, or is roughly 25 seconds of screen time with a speaking role sufficient?
1646.
Embark with us now as we hopefully answer all of these questions and less in our episode that hopes to celebrate Brendan Fraser History Month by examining the Janine Garofalo classic, Kids in the Hall, Brain Candy. Bum, 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 bum. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devin Decker, and joining me, my host companion, Paul Bellini. Paul? Oh, wait, no, you're Siege and Sarowick.
We could make some real money with a Poke Devin Day, I think.
I would be okay with a Poke Devin Day, let's be completely honest. You know what I would actually want to do? I want to meld two of my favorite things, which is like the hand on a hard body contest, where you put your hand on a truck, and whoever takes their hand off last wins the truck. Yeah. That's the contest. It's a hand on a hard Devin Day. Maybe we change the hard part of that. Just hand on a Devin Day, and people get to come together and put their hand on me. So, like, everybody kind of wins, but the person who keeps their hand on me the longest, they win something, like, more significant. Like, they get to buy me dinner or something.
You remember, it was Poke Paul Bellini, but you had to use a stick, so...
All right, so you know what we'll do? Okay, so there's the prize. We give people, like, those back scratcher, and they have to keep them on me.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And then the winner gets to touch me, Sansa back scratcher.
Ooh. Yeah, you know the real, like, man, the
Siege, and I'm really distracted by the fact that you're only in a towel.
the dark secret, the deep secret about all of that sort of silly shit that they did, though, right, is, like, at the end of the day, that money all went to stuff, right? Like, that money went to, like, various, like, charities and things like that all throughout, like, the North Bay Area and Canada and things like there's, like, the fact that they used that shit and then, like, you know, did good with it, I think is I think that's the secret sauce of the entire fucking Kids in the Hall ethos, right? Is like
the secret hall of the Kids in the Hall ethos is the fact that they don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck in a way that I don't think anybody who's creating comedy or content has ever given a fuck, or has ever not given a fuck, or will ever not give a fuck.
No, there is a certain detachment from the rest of the world that is required for their comedy, like for them to create their comedy, that comes across on our end, on the audience end, as being something that is either fucking hilarious or at times extremely offensive because of the ways in which it is so detached from our own sensibilities. And I mean, like, I say this as somebody that does not tend to, like, get offended at comedy, or that's not fair. I get offended at comedy, but I don't tend to take it personally when I do, right? Like, the idea being that, like, I find something offensive that a comedian says or does, I either work past it or maybe that's the end of my relationship with that comedian. But it doesn't mean that I think that that comedian should stop doing their comedy if it's working, if it's right, if
Yeah.
it's touching somebody, right? And I think that that's something that is
Touching
really
somebody
rough
was
with...
maybe the wrong choice of words there, with how some things have gone with comedians. But I understand the general
That's
message.
not part of their bit, though, right? Like,
maybe.
well,
Maybe Louis
okay.
C.K. was doing it to derive content. And then, like, he tested it out at a couple of clubs and
part
it
of my
didn't work.
process. You asshole. All right. Oh man.
But yes.
Well, but that's it, right? Like, is that's the side of it, right? Is there's clearly a line at some point where it becomes like it is hurting somebody, right? Like it is physically, mentally, like affecting another human being. That is probably for me a pretty clear indicator that it has crossed the line, right? And so there's something about the ways in which their comedy never quite hits me in that way. So it's just fucking wild. But yeah, like the hidden like thought behind all of their comedy of just like at the end of the day, they're trying to make everybody better people. They're just doing it. They're doing it in their own fucking way.
They're doing it in a way that is very early 90s. In a way that, like, that's how the world sort of approached things, where if we can laugh together at everything, then where will the differences be?
Well, right. And like we've talked about, like, you know, my theory before that that a decade doesn't end right at the turning point of the decade, but rather like 2 or 3 years in, right? Is they're doing early 90s sketch comedy through the lens of having learned and grown through the 80s, like and in Canada, let's talk about the fact that they weren't here in America, and like they were in North America, not United States of America. I have to make that distinction sometimes, I guess. But that idea
all the
that,
time, they're two different countries.
Well, right, but when I say America, well, okay, they were in anyway. But like this idea being that they were just far enough removed from our own culture and things like that, that like you have to remind yourself that sometimes with some of the shit that goes on in like the comedy and where it's aimed and things like that. And like there's just this, so there's this idea that like, yeah, they were doing this like we don't give a fuck comedy, we're just gonna do what we find funny like stuff. That works, because when you start to do comedy that you think the audience likes but it's not your brand, is where you start to kind of like lose your edge, right? Like you've got to stay true to yourself and earnest, and if that turns out to be something that the audience doesn't like, you're better off in a lot of ways walking away and really having a good long think about yourself as a comedian than you are to kind of like either force the issue or twist your comedy to some way to fit things, because we've seen it go bad both of those ways, right? With a lot of comedians that, you know, they grow past their prime and suddenly they don't quite work anymore, or the ones that say fuck it, I'm just going to be who I'm going to be, you know, your Dave Chappelle's and things like that.
And there is no better segue in the history of podcasting to go from talking about Kids in the Hall, the sketch show of the late 80s and early 90s, to go to talking about the Kids in the Hall film that we're here to examine and celebrate today, Brain Candy. Because Mr. Dave Foley had definitely come to that point in his life where he did not agree with the same sensibilities as the other 4 kids in the hall. And that is why he walked away and he got his job working on news radio and only shot this film out of contractual obligation. Which is why, of all the Kids in the Hall stuff, and, you know, pardon me if I'm wrong here, correct me if I'm wrong here, sort of the breakout star of the Kids in the Hall has such a small role in this film. And that's weird to say that it's a small role, but he kind of only plays 2 characters.
Yeah. Considering some of the character count and some of the other people, right? I think that Mark McKenna has talked about playing, I think, 10 different characters in this movie. I mean,
Mark McKinney plays separate characters in the same scene.
Oh, Scott Thompson does that throughout this entire movie too, right? Where he plays Baxter in the background, but then also plays the old lady, Miss Habersham or whatever her name is, right? So he literally plays like a doctor talking to himself in one moment. Yeah. Yeah, there's all those moments with those guys, right? But then you never get that with Foley, right?
Dave Foley plays Marv. That's his substantial role. He's the psychiatrist in 2 scenes, and then he is the father in Mrs. Hardecure's best memory, which, that poor woman.
Yeah. Well, he also has a small role that I don't think we see in the cut anymore, where he plays a worker at a burger joint who is discovering depression helps him build like so I have seen a version of this movie that I didn't realize I don't own anymore, and I guess I can't find exists, but I can find the scenes online, so I know I'm not crazy. Where he plays this character that works at a burger joint who is angry about like the world, and he's using that and pumping that into poetry. And so there's this whole like weird like subplot because you see him really early on, and then he shows up one more time in the middle, and then finally at the end he has like a big like moment with his poetry. And what's really interesting about his character is it really kind of plays with this idea that like depression is kind of something that like feeds into like creativity and art, and in some ways like you need this in the world in order to like really kind of explore and understand it, versus the idea of just taking a drug and just being happy, right? And like the fact that that doesn't exist apparently in the movie anymore is really wild to me. So he did have a whole other character that also just got cut, you know, and that makes you kind of wonder about some other elements of the movie that maybe just don't exist anymore, you know, because they just weren't working. Also, I have no fucking clue how I ever saw that original version of this movie.
My guess is there's a lot in this movie. This is a hard R, right? And we're going to talk about hard R's when we get to the reason why we're even talking about brain candy in the middle of Brendan Fraser History Month. Why this is, as Sejan said it, the peak where I've decided to plant my flag.
Yeah, yeah.
And we'll get there. And as hard an R as this film is for 1996, which I did misspeak, I thought it was 97, but it's 96. They've gone even harder with season 6 of Kids in the Hall on Amazon, which is fine. I have actually no issue with that. In fact, it kind of makes sense when you think about the fact that these guys just give zero fucks. So of course they're going to do things where they're naked and jumping up and down with their genitals out.
I mean, in a lot of ways, it feels like this is the kind of comedy they always wanted to do. They just always knew that there was a line they couldn't cross. That line is now moved, so they've happily moved along with it, because this is just, you know, I'm sure that there's even worse stuff that they've wanted to do that they've probably cut in here or there, yeah. Even on the new show.
You call it a line, but I think I'd call it a lorn. Which Mark McKinney does a wonderful job playing Lorne Michaels in this film.
Yeah, only surpassed by Mike Myers then playing him not a year later in Austin Powers, playing the exact same version of Lorne Michaels as Dr. Evil, which by the end of this movie, it almost is like you watch Mark McKinney evolve into Mike Myers by the end of this movie.
Yeah, that's a very interesting way to put it. But yes, that version, though, that you probably saw, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a TV edit at the time where Comedy Central played this on TV.
Yeah, so maybe cut out some of the raunchier stuff, but then in order to make the time up, put back in some of the other stuff, for sure, yeah.
It's your octopus scene from the Goonies on the TBS screenings of it. I mean, those don't happen anymore because, if the movie's shorter, we'll just put in more commercials and still get to.
Exactly. Yeah, it's weird. You don't get like, people talk about TV edit, and nowadays it's pretty synonymous with they cut shit out or they changed a line, right? Like you don't find a stranger in the Alps, right? like,
yeah,
like that kind of stuff. Like, but there used to actually be a time where TV edit literally meant there were scenes that they were going to reserve for television because they wanted to make up that time difference, right? Because they knew they were going to lose this scene. They filmed that scene. And certain networks only got got the rights to certain scenes. It was a fucking wild time.
It was a wild west of television in the 90s. And and we forget about that as we look at the streaming as a wild west right now, that cable really was only a 90s thing. And things like TBS will have the octopus scene when you're watching the Goonies. So then when you're like, no, I've seen that octopus scene. That's why Data says it. And your friends are like, I haven't. And they've just never watched it on TBS.
Yeah.
So you look like an idiot and a liar.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and in a lot of ways, you can argue about the ways in which that kind of changes things, a la this very moment in this movie where I was watching this thing and I was like, oh, what happened to those Dave Foley scenes? And the more I looked into it, the more I realized what was going on. And for me, it's a pretty. It is a way that this movie puts its foot down about what it's truly about, that without it, I feel like the movie gets a little lost in what it is trying to say. Like, it's not that it doesn't follow a coherent plot, oddly. It actually is one of the more coherent movies of, as far as like sketch comedy groups making film go. It's actually a pretty coherent like piece of cinema. And in that, it makes it kind of unique because it doesn't feel like it's just a bunch of sketches. You know what I mean? It's not Kentucky Fried Movie, right? It's not
Run Ronnie Run, which was the closest sort of comparison I was making while I watched this film for the
Yeah.
recording today, because I love Mr. Show, and Mr.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Show also had its later day like reemergence into the world of comedy with Bob and Dave Presents on Netflix.
Mhm.
Though distinctly not season 5 of Mr. Show.
Well, what's
There's a
weird,
reason
though,
why they changed the title.
yeah, but what's weird is that they open the show by revisiting the last sketch, much like season 6 of Kids in the Hall, or season 5 of Kids in the Hall.
Season 5, yeah. This is
Yeah,
season 6.
the ways in which it opens up with the whole digging them up from the grave that we watched at the end of season 4 of Kids in the Hall, Paul Bellini burying them, right?
Oh, backwards. 5 and 6. There were 5
It was 5
originally.
and
This is 6. Yeah.
Okay,
I
okay.
misunderstood your question. I want to.
Yeah. But at the end of 5, like, they get buried by Paul Bellini, and he literally dances on their grave, and then like, and has this bittersweet moment where he's like, finally, it's over. And then we watch at the beginning of the new one where he's like, you asked for this, I guess. Like poor Paul Bellini. But like the ways in which they do that, so it's really interesting that Bob and Dave do the exact same thing, but then immediately let you know, like, hey, we're gonna do a new thing now. Like, it's like a nice way to like ease the audience in that way. Whereas like I feel like the new season of Kids in the Hall is just like, nope, this is just more of that.
It is undistinguishable from the original seasons.
Yeah.
I just like kind of did a random smattering of episodes, and it feels like Kids in the Hall again.
Yeah.
Down to the fact that, like, I now realize, I think I mentioned it on the show, I might have just said it to you in passing, that, like, sketch comedy, I get tired of it when watching it.
Yeah.
And the reason why is I would watch Saturday Night Live and I would watch Kids in the Hall, and Saturday Night Live does not engage you, does not continually engage you. Kids in the Hall kind of does.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much oh man, like, so the one of the big things about Kids in the Hall for me, right? This strap in, people, because this is just going to be an episode about Kids in the Hall. At the end
Exactly.
of the day,
That's
we
the
are in the middle of
secret
Brendan
Trojan
Fraser
horse.
History Month, and here's the dirty secret: is I love this fucking movie, and I love this group of comedians so much that, like, I was more than happy to go with this. What Devin said he wanted to do it, but I wanted to give him as much shit as possible because it was so out of place for what we were doing. But the idea that that sketch comedy, right, has this really kind of like these rough edges that fans of sketch comedy have just kind of learned to love the ugliness, right? A lot of that ugliness kind of isn't present. It's not that it's not. One of the big things that people always talk about with sketch comedy is ending sketches. Sketches always end rough, right? Like, and Saturday Night Live can never figure out how to end a sketch. A lot of sketch comedy shows just kind of lean on some really weird shticks to end their shit, and they'll constantly go back to it. You mentioned Mr. Show earlier. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, like, they're famous for their whole, like, bleeding in. Like, if they could, they would always try and bleed into the next sketch.
One of the reasons why it's Mr. Show and Kids in the Hall are pretty much the sketch comedy that I enjoy.
Right.
Because
Kids in the Hall, the ways in which they know how to end a sketch and know how to bounce out when something is done is beyond none. Like they are so much better at shaping a full, complete, like, moment in a sketch than anybody else. Sometimes to the point where you end up with sketches within sketches. Sometimes you end up with a sketch evolving into a different sketch. Sometimes a sketch just ends and they just move and they just play a little bit of bass notes and then they move on. It's pretty stellar.
Yeah, I agree. It works, and I'm happy to see that it still works.
Yeah.
But what we're here to talk about today primarily, I mean, and you can't talk about the movie without talking about the group, is that movie from the mid 90s when they were the angry Kids in the Hall.
Yeah. Well, and what's really interesting about that joke, right, is that I don't think they actually were. I think there's this element to it where they'd always been really dark, and they'd always really looked at fucked up things in humanity and made jokes about them in a really interesting way. And I think that all it was that in the mid 90s, like, this wasn't the kind of humor we wanted, right? I think one of the wildest things about rewatching this movie for me is I was like, this is still funny, still hilarious, still poignant, and on top of that, the type of humor still works. And I realized it's because they were just like 30 years before their friggin' time with this movie, man. Like, maybe even in some of their sketch comedy, you could say that too. It's hard for me to kind of argue that because people loved Kids in the Hall when it was on TV. This movie, not so much, right? like famously, this movie caught a bunch of flack. I was not aware enough of the movie at the time that it came out, or like pop culture, to tell you exactly how people around me felt about it. But in retrospect, like, it is considered a cult classic because at the time it was not well received, but in retrospect people have learned to really come around to it, and that's how you achieve cult status, right? And so, like, knowing that, like, I have to go off of a lot of the stuff that was being said at the time, that this movie just feels mean in some areas. It just doesn't, it's not fun because it talks about depression and suicide, like all of this stuff that in the mid 90s we didn't want to focus on. That shit was going too good, we were too happy, and these guys were one of the few voices, the few loud voices, saying like, hey, everything's not perfect, you know. Like we're drugging each other to make sure that we don't acknowledge the fact that there's still some stuff that's not great.
I mean, the really insane part about Brain Candy is that it became timeless in the fact that America has become so reliant on pharmaceuticals.
Well, in the ways in which, not just pharmaceuticals, but business in general, right?
Yeah.
Like, definitely there's a huge drug push in this movie, and that is something we're going to talk a lot about. But before we get to that, like, we should acknowledge that a lot of what they're making fun of, like when McKenna does his Lorne Michaels-esque character at the head of this big corporation, it's not just drugs that they're talking about. That's just the focus. The ways in which marketing and all that crap in general, and the ways in which then pop culture is shaped by the business world in a way to just sell us more shit. Like, commercialism in general is really on display here, all through the lens of this idea of this antidepressant medication, which is just brings a whole other pile of shit with it when it comes to this movie.
Yes. I don't know. I mean, you're not wrong. That's a very good read on it, but it is the way that, like, I think of in the 90s. I think of the fact that in the 90s they wanted to put me on Ritalin. Back when Ritalin was like brand fucking new.
Right.
And my mother's like, no, you're not going to drug my kid because he's just bored. And I know that, like, mental health is having a moment, and that's an awful thing to say. But as somebody who was diagnosed with ADD when I was in second grade, and I have to be honest, I don't think that was an accurate diagnosis. I think it was too new, and really just any problem child, they were going to diagnose with it. So if somebody now is diagnosed with ADHD, which I think has supplanted it, I'm all for that diagnosis, and that you understand it and medicate properly in order to function within the world. But that always made kind of a big stamp on the way I approach the world, in terms of just taking a pill to fix a problem. Does that make sense, or do I sound like a total
No.
asshole right now?
So I think the evolution of the issue needs to be talked about, right? Because at the time this movie was made, overdiagnosis was definitely an issue that we were like looking at and exploring. And the idea that we've kind of come to is, like, it wasn't so much overdiagnosis so much as misdiagnosis. And so somebody that was being given, a young child that was being given some type of medication for this thing at the time that maybe they didn't need it, it wasn't because there wasn't an issue that needed to be addressed. It's just that the way to address it was maybe not this type of medication. It could have been counseling. It could have been a different medication. It could have been all this other stuff. We understood so little at the moment, and people were so happy to throw a drug at it because companies were coming in and saying, like, hey, like, we can make money if they just buy this product that solves their problem, right? And as this movie rightly addresses, sometimes the medicine ended up being worse than the disease, right? Like, sometimes to the point where you ended up with people and kids that were on medication that were so heavily medicated that they were suddenly just not humans anymore. And I mean, like, you see the same problem addressed in movies in the last 10 years with something like Silver Linings Playbook, right? And that sort of shit. And it is definitely a dangerous road to drive on, because of the idea that there are definitely people out there that need this kind of help. It's just, the problem is that when you assume everybody does, and that is what's wonderful about this movie, is there's this beautiful moment where it really turns nefarious, and that is when Don comes to him and says, we're going to get it approved for non-prescription, like over the counter. I mean, not non-pharmaceutical. Yeah, over the counter essentially. But he says we're going to make it prescription free. And like, so that idea that anybody can have it, and then there's the really scary bit at the end where it becomes like a straight up Orwellian moment, where you realize that where the company is able to get Chris Cooper, our star of our show, they're able to get him diagnosed medically as having clinical depression, and therefore he is required by law to start taking this medication that he now knows is making people even sicker, right? And like that becomes super scary and super dark, because what like we were getting close to those types of moments in the 90s. Not so close that it was literally going to be on live television. We were going to like fucking Running Man style, tie somebody up and shove medicine down their throat, right? But this idea being that you were kind of getting to a point where people were not being given a choice to take this medication or not. And that is true for some people. They, especially when you start talking about young kids, they're in a position where they don't get to say yes or no. If a doctor says to mom and dad, like, look, this is the thing to do, and mom and dad are just going to trust what, the experts say, suddenly you end up with a kid that's taking this medicine. And as I said, we're learning that it wasn't necessarily an overdiagnosis of these issues, but a misdiagnosis that really caused a lot of problems for people, right? And so, yeah, there is definitely some of that, like back in my day, you just sucked it up and you got better type shit that you got to be careful about when you're talking about this, because it's not necessarily that. People do need this kind of help, but the problem is that when somebody like Don, right? What is his name? It's not
Don Rorator.
Ripator or whatever.
Rorator. Yeah. Rorator is a name that they use a bunch in their sketches. Helen Rorator might be my favorite of the 30 Helens.
Yeah, but when Don Rorator, when somebody like this that clearly has these terrible intentions gets into the mix on that conversation, it can go bad. And that's true. That is factual. We've seen that happen in our life. So like we can't ignore that. But yeah, I think what you're really pointing to at the end of the day is how risky of a line this movie is really riding.
Yes, because in the 90s we'll take a Xanax and any of that sadness will just go away. You look at bands like Soul Asylum, who wrote a song like Misery, and it's just Misery is the name of the song, about we'll create a factory that makes misery, and then we'll create the cure because we control the disease. And like this just feels like an adaptation of that song, but with the kids in the hall driving the bus.
Yeah. Well, I was really surprised that at some point you didn't text me about how angry you were that this is basically just Don't Look Up 20 years earlier.
Well, the difference is that this is done way better than Don't Look Up. I fucking hated Don't Look Up. I'm not even like ashamed of it. The way that like this is the craziest thing, right? And it might be the best praise that I can lavish upon the kids in the hall is there's a subtlety to this movie that is
not a phrase I think any other critic talking about this movie has ever used, by the way. But go ahead, go on.
But it's subtle in the fact that like it's not overnight. It's not an overnight thing. Sure, there's a time jump in there. There's a 3-month time jump that does happen, but everything that occurs, it like works in real time in this way. So that now, living in 2022, I mean, this movie would work in 2022, kind of just as it is. Like the storyline and everything.
It was fucking wild to me watching this movie and thinking, man, I can't believe this movie is what, 25 years old? Like, yeah, it's insane. It
is. It really just, it hits so weird that watching this movie, so much of it is still relevant. I mean, the moment that really just spoke to me, and I'm going away from the point that we were currently on, but what really spoke to me is how Rorator decides that people who get into comas, they win a prize, like it's a contest. Yeah. Like whoever takes the most Rorator and gets into the coma, you get to go to the comatory, and your family gets $10,000. Like just gamifying something that is horrible.
Well,
I mean, that's reality TV. Right there. I mean,
one of the moments that really hit for me is the revelation that there's something wrong, right? Like the scientists that created the drug suddenly come to this realization, oh no, there's something wrong. He goes and he visits the old woman and she's like frozen in her backyard, all of this stuff, right? And when he goes to Dunn, it's not like a big revelation for the company. They've known for a while and they have this room full of people that they've been like rounding up. Like, so this idea that like he goes to the company and they're just like, oh yeah, we knew. And it's just like, that moment where you hope that the people that are there to kind of be the stopgap like catch it, and sometimes they do, but what you realize is like sometimes they, by the time they catch it, like the other people have already been clued in. Like there's this whole element to it where it's just like, oh yeah, this has just been going on and we're only just kind of coming around to it, and somebody has been nefariously hiding the information from us. That scared the crap out of me, because again, that is just so real. Right, that is something that is just so hits so close to home.
Yeah. Which, and that's the real Kids in the Hall for me, is it's not something that I disagree with it. It's comedy that makes me uncomfortable.
Yes.
In a way that, like, so last night I watched a couple of episodes of the new season just to make sure I had a good basis and could say without any issue that this show feels like the show it was before, that these are the same sensibilities just presented 26 years later.
Yeah.
And I stand by that wholeheartedly. It's really good stuff. But the whole thing with Motormouth doing the radio show in his bunker after the world has been destroyed by DNA bombs,
Yeah.
like it was funny. Like it was such a good sketch, and it was such a good like way to tie that whole episode together. But at the end of the day, I was just like, oh, I feel dirty. Like my skin is crawling right now. And
I mean,
I need to purge my mind a little bit.
Yeah, they fight the fights that need to be fought that we don't want to fight, right? And,
Yeah.
and like I want to acknowledge right now that a lot of the shit that we're saying is the same shit that people always say about comedy to try and cover up when people are being offensive when they don't need to be, and all that sort of shit. And the problem is that, as you mentioned earlier, like Kids in the Hall is kind of just like up there in the upper echelons of this stuff, along with like Mr. Show and things like that. And because of that, these are the shows that kind of gave other comedians the permission to be the like to use that gross narrative to cover their asses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so like, and it's not that I don't feel like these guys should not be called out when they do like offensive shit. Like they very rarely seem to take any type of real criticism to heart, but there are kind of moments where you kind of pick up on it. So like pointing to the new show, one of the very first moments in the new show is the return of Don, and he's sitting at a table that is full of women executives, and the conversation they are clearly having is about the ways in which like women are portrayed, very particularly in Kids in the Hall, and how female bodies are often portrayed by men in dresses and things like that. And they and it's like, it is addressed. It goes nowhere. They don't do anything about it. It doesn't stop them from dressing up like women for the rest of the show. But it is something that, it is a moment where you realize like they've heard that criticism, they've taken that criticism in, and they've decided that they are going to keep doing what they're doing with that knowledge. And so you're welcome to come along with them or not. And like, take that as you will. If that offends you, like, I don't blame you. Walk away, do your thing. I thought it was really interesting, and some of the stuff that they've talked about in the past with that has always really hit really well with me, wherein that like they portray these women. First of all, they started as a comedy group doing this shit on stage in the 80s, and they were just a bunch of guys that were just doing this stuff. They didn't have a troupe around them, so when somebody needed to play a woman on stage, they didn't have anybody that they were paying at that time, you know. And you could argue maybe they should have gone and found somebody, but like they did what they did, and that they threw the dress on. So when they started to film it, when Lorne Michaels came along and said, hey, you should make a show, they just kept doing what they had been doing on stage already for almost 5 or 6 years at that point, right? And so that just kind of continued it, and they didn't think anything of it. But then once they realized how much people thought it was funny, like, you know, and pointing to guys like Monty Python and stuff in the past using that kind of humor, like they just kind of went with it, right? And so this idea that it kind of got built into their DNA at first by necessity, and then eventually because it became part of who they were, and that's been really interesting. But also the idea that they always put themselves in the positions of the women that are catching the shit. When somebody is going to get punched, when there's going to be a swing taken at a female character, they portray them. If it's going to be a female character that walks in and just gets the job done, like there are actresses, there are female actors that are there to then pick it up, right, and do those parts. But if it's going to be anybody that's going to be the butt of the joke, then they are the ones that are there. They put their body in that in the way. And you know, that's kind of white knighting it, right? Like in a lot of ways, but it is kind of the ways in which they foresee themselves playing these characters. And there's just this idea that just like, it's just, they're just characters to them, right? And again, this becomes kind of an excuse for other comedians and other types of comedy to do some really heinous shit. And maybe even here you could point to some really offensive ways in which it's used. But that is the nature of the beast. Like that is why it exists, and that is how it lives, and that is what people are up against when they say, well, maybe we shouldn't do it this way anymore. This is the kind of history that they're coming up against.
Watching Kids in the Hall for the show, for the Say Report, finally unlocked a mystery and answered a question that I have been trying to solve since we were in university together. And that's the fact that we did improv shows, like, a lot. Like, improv was a part of the thing that the group of people I was friends with wanted to do. We had taken an improv class, and
everybody was really into Kevin McDonald in a dress, and nobody could figure out why. And then you rewatched and you understood it all.
But no, I wish that were the case. I wish that it were understood. But the fact of the matter was, even though for those improvs, we got some stellar actors to be a part of it, like Amanda and Stephanie, and I'm just going to use their first names, but I think you know which Amanda and which Stephanie I'm talking about when I drop their names here. They were willing to be part of the troupe and do improv with us when the theater the theater department rolled us out to be an improv troupe, just impromptu. But that's still 2 women, and then it was like 5 guys that were the troupe. So if it came down to we need another female for the scene, I was more than willing to portray the female character. I didn't just always want to be some male character, because also, like, I see that, and also it opened up the door for, like, Amanda and Steph to play male characters, right? Like, an essential part of improv and creating comedy is the fact that, like, well, we can be anything, right? That's what it is. One of us could be a horse if we wanted to.
Well, and what you're speaking to specifically is literally in the moment when you have to yes and something. If you're a body on stage and somebody points out something like a gender or a sexuality, you just yes and it to keep going with the bit. That thing could very well be something that goes against your normal self. And like, yep, like that is improv is the idea of going with that choice and sticking to it. Yeah, I mean, like, look, we're not going to crack the nut.
No, I know we're not going to crack the nut, but I do.
Sexuality right here on the Say Report today, like that's not going to happen, and it's either something you're totally offended by, something that you've never thought about, or something that like you've decided you're not offended by. And whoever you are, like live in that truth and acknowledge that and enjoy the things that you can with that, right? Yeah. Like. I cannot blame somebody out there who says this. I just cannot deal with the ways in which there is not a woman in the group. I mean, I've heard the same thing levied against something like Bob's Burgers, right? Where like watching like a marathon of episodes one night with a group of friends. At some point, a friend of mine, in just the purest intention, and I could not argue with her feeling. She was just like, "Is there a single actual female on this show?" I was just like, well, yeah, I mean, like, you know, you have
Christian Schall and Sarah Silverman,
but like to that point, like in the first 2 seasons of Bob's Burgers, you have like 2 women to speak to, and then every female character that comes on is played by a man putting on a funny voice, right?
And also, I mean, I talk about Sarah Silverman and her sister Laura. They play male characters.
Yeah.
So
you know, there is an idea that like first, and that's a show that is very much lauded for the ways in which women are treated, and I mean, like you know, Tina's become an icon for feminism in a lot of ways, and rightly so. But also, somebody out there saying, "Yeah, I just wish she was played by a woman," can't be wrong.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to go back to what I was saying and what this made me realize is, I guess the reason why I was okay if it came down to we need another female on stage, why I would like gladly leap into that role, is that I was kind of raised on Kids in the Hall where we just need the actor for the moment and do it. But sticking with the first name game here, Joe, who was a member of this improv troupe, it was such a weird thing too. Like where they're like, oh, we want to try to get people in. So will you go to this school? And the 7 of us would like go to a high school and do improv for kids. Like I don't know how that brought people to URI theater. I don't think it ever did, to be completely honest with you. I'm sorry, I'm digressing. But Joe, who was another member of the group, one night after a rehearsal, like he turned to me and he just tore me down. Like, why are you always playing these female characters? And I didn't know how to answer that, and I didn't know why it bothered him so much. And you've answered a lot of that question in terms of what it is, but if the 2 females who are in the troupe are already playing females, and, he's going to arrive with his wife, we could either not have the wife there, or I can take freaking Jamie's arm and show up as his wife.
Yeah,
Like,
and like I said, like it is a choice in the moment, and it is, and improv only works if you buy into the choice that you make, and you might come out the other side of it and look back and be like, man, maybe that didn't work for various reasons, but that's like the whole point of improv. And I mean, like let's get into what, you know, the point of art, right, is to experiment and see how you feel at the end of it, and sometimes those feelings aren't good, right? Like, and that's kind of the point of this movie, coming back to it.
Yep.
Is this idea
Sorry.
that sometimes there are things in this life that don't work, that don't make us feel good, that don't make us happy. And the idea being that you need those moments because they, first of all, they define the moments that do work, that do make us happy, and they define what works and what doesn't, you know. And it's a gross, it's a hard conversation, but it's one that these guys have always been willing to be a part of and willing to have. And then on top of that, like when somebody has come at them and said like this, you know, this doesn't work, you shouldn't do this, blah blah blah. I mean, look at the reaction to this movie. Even being told like, hey, that was not the best comedy movie that's ever been made. In fact, we're gonna just kind of bury it for a while. They, you know, they wrote it, but they don't deny it. They don't act like they were never part of it, and to the point where the first 5 minutes of their new season is all dedicated to making fun of it. Yes. It's beautiful. Like the ways in which they acknowledge and accept that this movie exists.
And also this one, we talk about, you say that comedy, you know, as long as nobody's getting hurt by what they're doing, whatever. The only people that I can think of who was ever hurt by their comedy is the Kids in the Hall. Because, I mean, another really crazy thing is like Kids in the Hall, I don't know when it aired initially. I have to imagine it was like the post Saturday Night Live. I know when, I don't know where on the schedule it was.
Yeah, so it was actually weirdly carried by CBS, and like it was shown. So I don't know how much of this is accurate, because a lot of the information that I have about the history of Kids in the Hall literally comes from a couple of documentaries and books that they have written and made about themselves. And in true Kids in the Hall nature, a lot of the stuff that they do and say in that stuff is not real. Like, and it's actually like, it's an old thing that even, again, pointing to Monty Python, also used to do, right, where they would release this thing and be like, yeah, you know, it's an autobiography, but so that gives us permission to say whatever the fuck we want. So take this all with a grain of salt, a lot of the stuff that I know about the history of these guys. But essentially, they were shown on the CBC at like 9 o'clock at night on weeknights, and it was basically public television. CBC was basically public television, but it was funded by the government, right? And they were kind of given carte blanche to be as silly and weird as they wanted. And noticeably, when they came to America with the show, when Lorne Michaels brought it over here, they were carried by CBS and shown at like 2 o'clock in the morning and still edited. So they used to talk about how funny it was that they were getting away with almost literal bloody murder on television up in Canada at family primetime, whereas like when they came over to America, they were shoved to the backlot of like being shown after like reruns of Saturday Night Live at like 2 o'clock in the morning. And it wasn't until they got picked up by like Comedy Central and the like that they were being shown at any time of day that anybody would watch. And by that point, they'd been through the editing of whatever CBS had done to them, whatever editing Comedy Central cared to do, if they were at that time. I can't speak to that one way or the other. And then on top of that, just the nature of just like, hey, you're being shown at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so who the fuck is watching for sketch comedy at that point? Right.
I mean, that's when Kids in the Hall became big, because it was all that was on in the summer. And also like when you got home from school, you'd have like 2 episodes of Kids in the Hall and then whatever movie Comedy Central decided to put on, because they understood their audience.
Yeah
But
yeah, that was kind of what was going on with Kids in the Hall in America. Is it was either super late night, or it was so early in the afternoon that there wasn't anybody home to like watch them and clutch their pearls.
Cool. That's what I thought. I always thought that it was sort of an after Saturday Night Live thing. Yes. It was to like so that Lorne Michaels had something that he was in control of for those people who stayed up for Saturday Night Live and were still awake looking for entertainment.
Yeah.
But for me, it was watching on Comedy Central, and then there was that whole resurgence of DVDs that was like piloted by Family Guy, and you know, it brought it back from the dead and all that stuff. And then when Kids in the Hall came out on DVD, I had a group of friends who like all of them bought it, and that became what they did to pass the time, was watch 7-8 episodes of Kids in the Hall on like a Friday night, and like that, and with no other activities.
Yeah, Kids in the Hall was always really weird for me too, because like for me, I was very much of the friends group that was too good for it. Sketch comedy in general was just kind of passe by the time like we kind of really came to comedy. So like I was watching Kids in the Hall because it was on, and I was falling in love with it for all of these reasons. And then like going to school, going to classes, going to friends hangouts, and like doing crush your head bits, and like being kind of like made fun of and put in a corner for it, like so I I I had Kids in the Hall in my repertoire, and I know a few of my friends did too, but it became one of those things that they didn't want to talk about because it wasn't cool to talk about.
Yeah. But because it was one of the things that everybody liked, working at the video store, one day I was, hey, can you grab Brain Candy? And we'll all sit and watch Brain Candy. So we did that, and we all sat and watched it. And what totally became part of the lexicon of the friend group was, would you agree that Paris is the capital of France? Then we're back in agreement.
So then we're back in agreement.
Yeah. So then we're back.
We're back in agreement.
But that's how they would do it. They wouldn't do it with the actual timbre and delivery that Mark McKinney has in the movie.
Nobody can.
Yeah, that's true. He's wonderful. And seeing him on Superstore and the character of Glenn, and it just, what this made me realize is just how fantastic actors the kids in Hall actually are.
All of them. I mean,
them.
even Foley, who famously never did too much work that was outside of just Foley, right? Even to the point where you made fun of the fact that he went to what was it, news radio afterwards. You could have just called that another Kids in the Hall character for him.
He's just Marv. He's basically Marv working at a radio station.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's what it is. And I love Dave Foley, and I really like Dave Foley and things like Call Your Mother, that failed Kira Sedgwick comedy on ABC that I might have been the only person who was watching. He played an out of character role there. I don't know. It's good stuff. It's really enjoyable stuff. But Brain Candy was the thing that I watched and was like, oh, these guys are actually great. Seeing it distilled out into a world the way that I was enjoying like Mr. Show, because Mr. Show is what we would watch to wind down after we wrote Slether. We would put on episodes of Mr. Show. So if you ever get a chance to see Slether, which I'm searching, because maybe we could do an episode on Slether, right? Since we're talking about comedy sensibilities and what inspired them. A lot of that was fueled by the stuff that you could see on Mr. Show and the Ben Stiller Show, just to be an asshole about what was the influence there. But then seeing Brain Candy, I'm like, oh, when these guys are allowed to like live in their world unfettered, it's kind of awesome.
Yeah.
Like, and the way that they're playing characters and multiple characters in a single scene, like, I really grew to love and respect them after seeing Brain Candy. So then, like, doing the research for the episode and finding out that, like, oh no, people fucking hate that movie.
Yeah.
But then what it also speaks to, and the reason why I asked when did this air, they were even being edited for a 2 a.m. time slot in America. Yeah. They were not getting the same type of scrutiny that a motion picture received, right? Because famously, the only thing that they were asked to cut from Brain Candy was the character of Cancer Boy. And Cancer Boy was not some new invention for Kids in the Hall Brain Candy.
No, Cancer Boy it was actually one of their more recurring characters that are in this movie. For a movie full of so many great original characters for them, like the ones that they do go back to the well on, like Cancer Boy, are really funny and really interesting.
Yeah, it really works because you get to
love
see
that Cancer Boy comes back and gets to be in the awards show part.
Oh, because he did a song. That's him whistling.
Oh man,
it's wonderful. But they're like, you need to cut this. It's crass. No, I don't like it. And the reason why, right? It's not just the fact that it's under motion picture scrutiny, but that person who voiced that concern with it had lost family members to cancer. So like it hit them that wrong way, right? Which comedy always can do, right? Because you need to consider all of the experiences of the people who are coming to the comedy that you're presenting. Yeah. Which is just an interesting thing about comedy that I don't think a lot of people think about. Sorry. So
that comedy is so subjective. Yeah. I mean, I think people think about it, but I don't think they think about the actual ramifications of that comment, right?
Yes.
The idea that comedy is subjective is something we all know, but this is one of those examples that I don't think people really consider, right? Is that somebody coming to that character with that kind of baggage might react in this way. Meanwhile, somebody coming to that character with that kind of baggage might react in a completely different way.
Yeah. But they refuse flat out. They're like, no, we're not cutting the character. And because they refuse to cut the character, they're not given the same marketing. They are only given a limited release. They're not really given a chance to succeed.
Yeah.
So really the only one that joke hurts is them, which is an interesting thing to look at and consider.
Yeah.
That them standing by a bit that they care about is sort of what sunk this film.
Yeah, but it's still. I think that the cult status of it really speaks to kind of the just the power of this movie, like how good it actually kind of is in itself. Again, it's not like The Godfather, but like the ways in which this movie really does. First of all, it's earnest, as we talked about earlier. They stick to their guns the entire time. There's not a moment where they are just not, where the bit does not just like kind of supersede anything, right? And then like on top of that, the way in which it's made and the people that are involved in it become really kind of interesting, because it speaks to how much they were really touching people then too, right? Like you joked about Janine Garofalo, but the reason we're watching it this month is the 30 seconds of glorious screen time that one Brendan Fraser gets. And this is not early enough in his career where he's just doing it to get work, right? Like you have to imagine that the reason that he's in this movie is, as a Canadian, the kids in the hall are making a movie and they come to you with a bit, you take it, right? Like these people are in this movie because, like, why would you say no?
Yeah. I mean, he's been acting like significantly, School Ties being his first one, 92, 4 years. He's done something like Encino Man that was a breakout. He's done Airheads. I mean, it could just be the fact that, like, he's worked with Adam Sandler and the whole Lorne Michael connection of it all. Like, I don't, like, it could just be that he's Canadian. It could be that he's running in the same circles and one of these guys can do it. He goes on to be with Dave Foley in Blast from the Past. Like,
and Monkey Bone, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't Dave Foley show up in Monkey Bone? Yeah.
Yeah. So I
might be conflating those two movies now.
You might be complete. I'm one of them shows up in Monkey Bone. There's crossover, and Chris Kattan, and he's SNL too. So it all kind of works together in this weird synergy that it's not surprising that it would be in it. And he's also no stranger to the uncredited cameo. Right? That's the whole reason why, to celebrate Brendan Fraser History Month, like, we're breaking ground on the fact that there's this whole subsection of Brendan Fraser films where he doesn't get credit because he just shows up for a small role. And that small role could be something like in this film.
Yeah.
Where he is a test subject in the placebo group and then steals a monkey cage from the gay orgy that's been moved from the park.
And then goes on to write Monkey Bone. This is really just a prequel to Monkey Bone.
Now I'm seeing it, and it's really bothering. No. But yeah, you have that whole thing, or you have something like Now and Then, where he is the soldier that is the inciting action of the entire film.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I thought you were going to then point to the fact that, like, then there's also the idea that he shows up as Link a bunch of times because, like, he clearly likes working with those people, right? And showing up and doing that. I mean, I think that the bigger thing for me is that the uncredited walk-on role always says to me that this is a person that just likes working, likes movies, and likes these types of movies, right? Like, you don't show up uncredited in a movie for 30 seconds if you're not enjoying your time there, right? Right? So I think what it really talks to is, especially really early in his career, he was just happy to just be doing anything because he's just happy to be working. And I think that's something that we've really learned about him in the last 20 years, right? Because of everything that happened in terms of him kind of stepping away from filmmaking for a little bit, whether it was by choice or, by not. But that idea being that coming back to it and willing to do these things, willing to play Cliff in Doom Patrol, which, let's be honest, when that script landed in front of him was a risk, right? Now, in retrospect, one of the best moves he probably could have made. But at the same time, when he first got introduced to that character, you know that there had to be a moment where somebody said to him, if you wanna. And he was just like, hell yeah, I wanna.
I was in The Affair, and people want me back in TV and movies. There's a whole complainulate.org website about it.
Yeah, but there is something that the ways in which it speaks to just kind of, he clearly likes movie making. He clearly likes the job he does, and he wants to be doing this. And on top of that, happy to be working with the kids in the hall, happy to be working with Pauly Shore, happy to be, he finds himself working with friends a lot, and that's really cool to see. And that really speaks to another reason why we kind of adore the work that he does do, because he clearly is happy doing it. And you can't say that about everybody. There are people that we watch that do movies, and you're just like, man, this person's phoning it in. They're just doing this for the paycheck. I don't really know if there's a moment that you can speak to in his career where you feel like he's not doing a job he wants to be doing.
Well, maybe we'll talk about that next week with Furry Vengeance, a movie I still haven't seen. But yeah, you're right. And what it speaks to for me is loyalty. He is loyal to the people that he enjoys working with, so much so that he shows up in those two Pauly Shore films. He shows up in G.I. Joe, the first one, Rise of Cobra,
that's right.
because it's the same director as the Mummy movies. Like what he is doing, and it's that he's loyal. And if somebody says, yo, do you want to show up in this movie? He's willing to say yes. And also being uncredited, he's kind of willing to, give up the bigger paycheck that maybe getting a credit would come with.
Right. I mean, he's not, yeah, I'll do it, but you got to name me and I need this, this, and this so that it advances me in this way. No, he's like, yeah, of course. I show up on set for a few hours and hang out with you that after we made this movie together that basically made my career. Yeah, I could do that for you. Let's do this. It's interesting because we are never going to truly know celebrities, right? Like
Right.
we can act like we have built this person in our head, and that clearly must be the person they are. And we learn, never meet your heroes because they never meet those expectations. But this idea that we can get these kind of little insights from the choices that they make and the things that they do is kind of at the heart of why we follow and fall in love with certain people and certain characters, right? And why we fall out of love with them. When somebody's personal life kind of ekes through and we learn some terrible shit about people, it changes the ways in which we view them completely, and we've seen that happen more than once. It's really interesting because we keep finding, the more and more we find out about a person like Brendan Fraser, the more we kind of fall in love with them, right? And it's why we kind of, you and I have chosen to go down this path for 6 years now, right?
Yeah. I mean, it continues. Like, what started as a joke 7 years ago, but then it's like, do you think we can really do it? Do you think we can actually celebrate Brendan Fraser History Month? And as each year passes, more and more I am finding, yeah, I could keep doing this. It's even if he were to stop acting tomorrow, if he announced tomorrow, I'm not acting anymore, he pulls a Gene Hackman post Welcome to Mooseport, which I would get it, right? First of all, I want to say to Gene Hackman and the family of Gene Hackman, I get why Mooseport was the last one. I understand. I do. I truly do. But if he were to say that, like, there's still so much that we haven't even examined that I'm excited to watch and celebrate. And what I learned from watching this movie, where he does have just 30 seconds of screen time. Imagine if he had 30 minutes of screen time and was just like, I'm not going to get credit for any of that.
Much like Gene Hackman and Welcome to Mooseport. But
When Gene Hackman wishes. Sorry.
I some say that he came up against the acting challenge that was being with Ray Romano and realized I cannot compete.
I have seen the future of acting, and it is Romano. But watching Kids in the Hall and giving it a whole week, the way that we do on this show, right? The way that we celebrate Brendan Fraser History Month, where, I mean, I can't speak for Sejin, but I know that I do my due diligence for these Brendan Fraser movies. It's not just like watching the movie, it's taking notes, it's making sure that I read some literature about it, see how people were feeling, and then doing that with something like Brain Candy. What I unlock and what I realize is just how genuinely loyal Brendan Fraser is to the people who matter to him and to the country of Canada, of which he is a dual citizen.
Yeah. I once heard that there's this idea that like being an actor in Canada, like I guess being licensed as an actor in Canada, I don't even know if that's how it works. But this idea being that there is a certain amount of work for Canada, for the CBC, that you're kind of expected to do, maybe even required. Some people have talked about it as if it's a literal like mandate. But I don't know. Like, I think to your point about it being loyalty, I think it's just the idea that you just feel this kind of need to make sure that Canadian art is being celebrated in your career. You get to a point in your career where like supporting more Canadian made art becomes really important to you, right? And so like the likes of guys like Ryan Reynolds and things like that kind of do these benefits, these you know, whether it's showing up for a telethon on TV to collect money for somebody, or you know, you show up in a sketch comedy show, or you show up in a movie uncredited, because there is this idea of support kind of amongst Canadian artists, whether that is government mandated or not. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but this idea being that exists, I definitely see that, right? You know, like Degrassi used to pull in people all the time, and it kind of felt like it was just this love of celebrating Canadian television that did it, you know?
Yes, and super fan of the Say Report Hab guy. If we're completely off base with how Canadian entertainment works, please let us know.
Yeah, if they all hate each other and they hate working together, but the government is literally forcing them, please let us know.
Yeah, I'm very interested, because I mean, no secret of me, it's not something that's really come up on the show. I love Canadian productions. It is something that, and maybe it's from my time with the kids in the hall, but I think about watching something like Flashpoint, a show that CBS licensed from the CBC as summer entertainment, and just eating it up and enjoying every moment of that show, because it was so influenced by Canadian sensibilities in terms of how the police are supposed to act. So while it was still kind of propaganda, it didn't feel like, they felt like good cops. Like they didn't, you know, give a little bit. It wasn't like Chicago PD where they're going to the silos.
Yeah, no, yeah, I like I said, like whether it's a matter of everybody just loves working together, or a matter of everybody wants to support one another, or there is literally some other type of thing going on with the way that the arts work in a country that I'm not entirely familiar with, something definitely lends itself to this Canadian sensibility of production that let's be honest, a lot of Americans like, whether they realize it or not. You know how many of your shows that you love, comedy and drama, are made in Canadian television that are just brought over? And then there's these times where Canadian television is brought over and it doesn't land well, and people go, well, it's Canadian, what do you expect? But like, no, the 5 of the shows that were on that night were also Canadian produced. You just didn't realize it. Like there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. A lot of it has to do with some simple stuff, like tax breaks. Vancouver is a huge film tax haven, like as far as filming goes. It's why literally every CW show is made there. Like it's why the same mansion that shows up in fucking Oliver Queen there in Arrow is the same mansion that also shows up in all of the fucking like Disney made for TV movies like The Descendants and stuff, because that particular mansion happens to be a known filming location that has opened its doors to filmmaking, and there's tax breaks in doing it there, so it shows up in everything.
It's like the castle from Scott Pilgrim. That is the castle in so many things.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't know. And then if while we're just celebrating Canadian television, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Being Erica, which I might subject Siege into a very special episode on sometime, because that show's fucking banana pants, and I love it. Yeah. Even though it has constantly cited by me one of the worst moments of paid advertising ever in a television show.
Yeah.
When they get a new car. But I don't want to go any further than that. But yeah, it's really enjoyable stuff, and it was really exciting to get to rejoin the kids in the hall, especially because they have the new season of show on Amazon, and it's good. It's really enjoyable.
Did you watch their kind of semi-reunion show from, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, Death Comes to Town?
That's from 2010.
2010. So yeah, about 12 years ago. Yeah. Did you catch any of it?
I saw it at the time, but I'm not really familiar with it now.
The entire thing is on YouTube.
Yeah.
So just do yourself a favor.
It's on Amazon too.
It's just one season's worth of stuff. It's probably better quality on Amazon. Yeah. So watch it there.
If you already have Amazon to be able to watch the 6th season.
Well, like what's really interesting about it is the ways in which it really follows a lot of the same patterns that you see with Brain Candy, in like the ways that there are some characters that they revisit. There's some really great new characters that are there, but it is this overarching storyline that ties it all together rather than it being these individual sketches. It's but more than Brain Candy, I think it falls much more into the sketch comedy mold, where they can kind of cut to a different character doing a completely different thing, and it allows you kind of to just break off from the joke that they just had, and they don't have to continue it. Whereas like Brain Candy really feels like everything kind of really feeds off of itself and all back into itself, right? and it has this really wonderful structure where it sets up Brain Candy has this really wonderful structure where it sets up all these different people and all these different characters that you're going to keep revisiting throughout the movie, and they don't seem too connected at first, but the ways in which by 30 minutes in they all are, and then the writing out the ways in which they all interact with one another or affect one another and all of that stuff, like it's a really beautifully structured film. Like for all of the shit you want to give it about how it may not work because it doesn't land, some of the comedy might not be funny, doesn't work with everybody, or it is just straight up offensive in other moments. You cannot deny that the way that that movie is made and the structure of that film is pretty fucking stellar. I mean, like the growth of Don into a straight up supervillain by the end of that movie, like no joke. He starts off as a Lorne Michaels like riff that McKenna is doing, and stays that even when he becomes who he is at the end. But he does become a straight up Bond villain in the end, like with the broken hand being the signature scar, right? And the button up jacket and all that. And it is literally the same bit that you do see like Mike Myers do later. I was not joking about that.
Oh no,
but
yeah.
A year later, like he does his own, what he has admitted is his own Lorne Michaels in basically the same Bond-esque villain version, right? So like there is something about the ways in which Lorne Michaels has rubbed off on these guys.
And I'm sorry, I can't feel bad for you, Mr. Michaels.
No. Well, I mean, so like Lorne Michaels, let's take a hot second to talk about it. A lot of the stuff that we talk about with the way that Canadian television is brought to us and the way that Canadian actors are brought to us, and we kind of said this with Brendan Fraser, but I actually wouldn't honestly be surprised if there was some element to Lorne Michaels' influence in his career early on that brought him to America and to American film. Because if you want to know how
Dick Wolf, right? And that's NBC. So it could be there. I'm just trying to spitball off of what I do know about him in the moment. Sorry.
If you want to know what Lorne Michaels, like if you really want to know what your sensibilities are and how they were like created, like Lorne Michaels is probably responsible for a large portion of what you enjoyed as when you were young enough for this stuff to start being formed. And like kind of like he would bring people down from Canada and put them on all sorts of various projects to see how they did, whether it was put them in movies or put them writing in the writers room for SNL. I mean, like he literally broke up the Kids in the Hall for a little bit and sent a couple of them to go write for SNL, gave Dave Foley a couple of movies to try, like shit like that, like and it didn't quite work, so then he brought them back together and let them make Kids in the Hall the show. Like there's this moment in the Kids in the Hall like documentary that where they talk about Lorne Michaels came to them, really loved their work, and said, "Why don't I give you a show?" But it wasn't that simple, right? And one of those moments where you can kind of point to the bias of that documentary and say, like, it wasn't that easy. Lorne Michaels came to them and said, "You guys are funny. Let me see what I can do with you." And then what he did is he proceeded to break them up. And then they all realized that we can't do it on our own. So they all came back together and did this, right? And funny enough that it feels like that's kind of been their whole trajectory, their whole lives, is every time they break apart, they get moderate success, but they're never quite happy with what they're doing. So they come back together and do a project. It just seems like that's been their whole life. But Lorne Michaels shaped that, right? And he did that with everybody. He would find somebody out there that was really funny, and he would bring them on and test them in a couple of areas. Hey, maybe you're going to write for this sitcom for a while. Maybe you're going to star in the sitcom for a season and see how that does. Maybe you're going to do this movie or play this character or work on SNL in the writer's room. And if you work out here, we'll see what else we can do with you. And because of that, he ends up shaping the landscape of comedy throughout the entirety of the 90s and the 2000s. And I would argue even now, right? Even though I think nowadays he takes a much more hands-off approach.
Now and then, Lorne Michaels was shaping comedy.
Yeah, I mean, like Lorne Michaels is really responsible for a lot of the sensibilities that we have about American comedy through the lens of what he was doing, going to Canada and finding these people and bringing them down.
Yeah.
It's wild. And so to that point with the Brendan Fraser stuff, like I have to know what that relationship is, because man, would Brendan Fraser be in the position he is if Lorne Michaels did not somehow carve a path for him? Whether or not he walked him down that path, I don't know, but he definitely shaped the walkway for him, right?
I'm all about checking into it, but it really does feel like Dick Wolf is the one who found him. But you know, again, they're two guys who probably work together on NBC.
Are they both Viacom? Yeah, if they're both under Viacom, then yes.
It's just how it would work, because Dick Wolf was doing Law and Order in the 80s at the same time, so it would make sense if Lorne Michaels kind of represents the comedy mask, and Dick Wolf represents the tragedy mask.
Well, and then the other side of the whole Viacom conversation with those guys involved is also at the same time is the MTV and generation,
Yes.
like the ways in which MTV is kind of being birthed and shaping the ways to the point where at the end of this movie, MTV actually gets a thank you in the credits for some of the stuff that they helped out with. Not an MTV movie in any way. Maybe it should have been, but the ways in which that whole sensibility comes in as well is fucking wild.
Yeah, the fact that this movie just sort of exists is the weirdest part about it. I didn't realize how close to the tail end of the show. Like it's basically the season 6 before they got the season 6 in 2022.
Yeah.
Like they get to do 5 seasons of it, and then Dave Foley is unhappy, but we said we'd do 5 seasons in a movie. Oh my God, they got the 6 seasons in a movie. Way to go, Kids in the Hall. Hashtag community joke. But it's one of those situations where, for me, this felt like, oh, suddenly the Kids in the Hall are popular again, so let's give them a movie after what they were doing on Comedy Central. But then to go back and be like, no, this was them at sort of, this was their swan song in a lot of ways.
Yeah, so Bruce McCullough specifically talks about how when they first started the show, because of their history of doing improv and sketch comedy on stage, when they first started doing the show, the heart of what they did in the earlier seasons was the in front of an audience in studio shit, right? But if you watch the show, they slowly start moving more and more towards their filming stuff, where some of the later seasons they have entire episodes where it's all out of studio, just filmed material, right?
Yep.
And that was kind of what birthed the movie. Was through all of that, they realized that they had 1 or 2 ideas that were just too big to put in the show, and this is one of them. So it is kind of their swan song, because it is kind of the natural evolution where they started literally off stage, not being filmed. They got discovered, and now they're doing the TV show, and most of it's in front of an audience, but some of it's film stuff. Then it's slowly more and more film stuff, and then finally they just do a full-on movie. It's a beautiful evolution for them. And I think that if you look at the new season, I don't think anything's in studio, right?
No, it does feel like everything is on stages.
I mean, and so there's just this beautiful like evolution of comedy and the ways in which comedy kind of works, like both as your career and the 80s into the 90s. That's just what happened with comedy. What we used to love of like guys coming in and doing stand up on late night TV slowly turned into, we don't really want that anymore, but we'll watch a stand up comic get a TV show, get a sitcom. And you keep pointing to Dave Foley like wanting to walk away, and like that's kind of always been in the DNA, because like Dave like I said, like when Lorne Michaels first broke them up, one of the first things he did was put Dave Foley in shit. Like he was in movies, as opposed to the other guys that were doing behind the scenes stuff, like writing and producing other stuff. So like that's just kind of always been his nature. I think they've all kind of had this feeling of them wanting to go and do their own stuff. I think it's just the idea that they do their own stuff for a while and they miss the work that they are doing together. Because the work they are doing together, they are able to get away with so much and do as much of their own stuff. So I don't think it's a matter of like Dave Foley specifically wanting to go away and that's what destroys the whole thing. I think all of them have that feeling of being like kind of pulled to other projects, but at the end of the day, never wanting to forget that like this is kind of their baby, where they get to just come back and do whatever they want with. I mean, because if it was a matter of just Dave Foley being the person that he is, being the one like tough nut, like being like, I don't want to do this anymore, man, like the fact that they keep coming back together to do stuff is fucking buck wild then. like I don't know if I'd be able to work with a human that behaved that way. So I just can't believe that it's that drastic of a thing, right?
I think maybe he was just tired of doing Kids in the Hall, which is another thing that I also understand, being fatigued in a project and just, I want to do other things.
Right.
But even if you're having a good time.
I think they all felt that, is what I'm saying. I don't think that was just purely Dave Foley feeling that way, so they all had to give it up, right?
Yeah, but no, and I understand that. Like, they had decided we're going to end this series, but one of the reasons why Dave Foley pulls away from Brain Candy and has such a smaller role is because he was like, I want to take that break. And that's why he does news radio. And that's why, I mean, it's well documented. It's well documented that his, as much this film, he does not have his fingers in it as much as he did during the show.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, even to that point, Bruce McCullough specifically is not listed as one of the writers on this, and it's not that he's not written a bunch of the sketches. In fact, I mentioned Death Comes to Town later, and that is actually more his baby than anything else. He is the head writer on that. I think with McKenna, I think as the second, like, I say secondary writer. That's not fair. They're both listed at the same level, but like interestingly, I noted that McCullough was not listed as a writer on the movie, despite the fact I knew that he had definitely created some sketches. Was one of the original Kids in the Hall. I think he had Kids in the Hall in the name. I think him and McKinney were like the Kids in the Hall. I might have this backwards, but essentially, like McCullough and McKinney had been working in the '80s as one group, and Kevin McDonald and Dave Foley had been working as another, and they came together to form the Kids in the Hall, and then like.
And Scott Thompson just showed up one day.
Supposedly, Scott Thompson showed up one night, threw donuts at them on stage, and then like a year later, they were like, "Man, we just got to get this guy in the group. He just makes everything better."
He really does. Scott, I didn't realize how much I missed Scott Thompson, because I can think of things that everybody else has done post Kids in the Hall, but Scott Thompson, he's just kind of still been Scott Thompson.
Oh, the wildest one to me is he had a recurring all the way beginning to end role on Hannibal. And the only reason that I bring that up is that one of the sketches of the first episode of the new show involves him being a chef, has this beautifully directed moment that looks like it's straight out of Hannibal. And I was thinking that. I was like, wow, this feels very Hannibal influence in the ways in which he's playing with his food here. And then the sketch literally ends with him asking to cook a human. And I was like, wait, okay, now wait a minute.
Can I cook you? I would love to be prepared for you, brother.
My chef, I would love to be. Yeah,
that's the blueberry pie one, right?
Yeah. The blueberry tart.
Yeah, the little pie.
God.
Yeah,
it's so that's just the kind of stuff he's been up to, is like weird little character roles like that. But yeah, nothing that has really kind of made you forget who he is, which is just, fucking Buddy. Buddy was the name of his character on the old show, right?
Yeah.
Man, Buddy Cole, I think is the full name. Oh man. He at some point wrote a book as that character. That's how dedicated to his character work he was. He wrote a straight up fictional autobiography of that guy.
My favorite thing that he did is in the early Napster days, where like anybody could just release music when Napster was there. He did a parody of Stan that is all of the written parts of it, instead of being Eminem writing as the character of Stan, writing as Scott Thompson to Eminem and then getting the responses.
Oh man. Yeah,
I
mean, they do great stuff on their own. I mean, Kevin McDonald's and the work that he's done with Disney and the voice work he's done. I mean, Dave Foley, even at that point, the stuff that he's done outside of the group has been awesome. Yeah. It's just that when they come together and they form this group,
it's something special.
It's something different and something special.
Yeah, and that's what we're looking at today with Brain Candy, and it's tangentially tied to Brendan Fraser. And after this episode, Siege and I will get to go into the lab and see how we want to approach other uncredited cameos from Brendan Fraser when celebrating Brendan Fraser History Month. And after everything, you guys also get to look at, Furry Vengeance next week. So like, we're really lowering expectations before Furry Vengeance, which might be the best way to take in that movie. Again, I've never seen it.
I am going to point to Brendan Fraser's love of physical shtick and the ways in which that's never quite worked for him critically. But he's still... I think that you're going to find that it's a movie that he's making because he wants to be making it. It just doesn't work. And another movie that we've looked at in the past that I would point to for that is Monkey Bone, right? Like it is another movie where he does a bunch of physical shtick and he's clearly having a good time doing it. But at the end of the day, it's not necessarily something we always want to watch.
I mean, one could also argue sort of Dudley Do-Right is a lot of physical shtick. But I think Dudley Do-Right would have been much better if it just weren't called Dudley Do-Right.
Yeah, right.
And get to talk about the duality of man and who was a good guy and who was a villain, but not beholden to Jay Ward's creation. But yeah. All right, Siege.
I've got a couple of other like little notes here or there
Yeah.
that I definitely don't want to forget. Um, like the Kids in the Hall is such a part of their DNA that there is I think it's Bruce McCullough and Kevin McDonald both show up in Unaccompanied Minors, one of the best of the worst Christmas movies that I've done in my Christmas watching more than once. Right
Miranda Cosgrove's in that one, right?
I don't remember who the kids are. It's such a forgettable movie. Otherwise, Lewis Black plays the villain in it, which is kind of the only real reason for me to rewatch that movie. Is Lewis Black has such a small film career, but every one of those moments where he shows up in film, I love. Accepted being my other
look
favorite.
forward to 2026 where we cover Accepted.
But when those two guys show up in that movie, they are credited as the guards in the hall.
That's hilarious.
The guards in the hall 1 and the guards in the hall 2. Like that is how much this kind of defines these guys and their careers, right? As even when they show up in these other things, they still it's reminiscent of that. And the only other thing I wanted to point to is because we've talked about all my other notes, but we cannot ignore the fucking soundtrack of this movie. Like it does that really great thing, and maybe this is where the Viacom MTV connection comes in. But the ways in which it has a phenomenal soundtrack that does not defy the normal Kids in the Hall music, right? So first of all, I mean, like the famous like Kids in the Hall music is what's the name of the group? It's
Shadowy Men from a Shadowy Planet.
Shadowy Planet, right? And they're just an instrumental surf rock group. Despite what they may want to tell you, they are a surf rock group. Anybody that knows anything about them will know why that's a fucking like sore spot.
But you don't want to be a surf rock group because that's the Beach Boys, and then suddenly you're compared to the Beach Boys, and they're the greatest American band ever.
They literally wrote a song called "We're Not a Fucking Surf Rock Group," right? And then like 20 years later, they released a collection of all of their work, and the name of the collection is "Shit, I Guess We Were a Surf Rock Group." But yeah, Shadowy Men on a Shadowy Planet, and their song "Happy Again" or "Happy Forever" is the theme song for Kids in the Hall. Full version of it credited in this movie, like awesome stuff there, right? But then the other stuff that they pull in, like They Might Be Giants, Tragically Hip, like there's so much stuff going on the soundtrack of this, and it all feeds into and works with that sound that you just associate with them, right? And at the end of the day, like that instrumental surf rock, like kind of really speaks to the same element of the we don't give a fuck attitude that we were talking about really at the beginning of this episode with their entire comedic sense, right? Like it is a group of guys just getting around and just jamming out for as long as they jam out, and it's going to just be a lot of the same beats you recognize, and then every now and then it's going to be a little different. Like you could break down that entire fucking genre of music and talk about and that specific band and how it was such a perfect fit for the Kids in the Hall, and the music in this movie just builds off of that in such a great way. And so I don't want to like forget to mention, like, check out the soundtrack for this movie. It's only like 5 or 6 songs. If you find the Kids in the Hall like OST, I think most of it is actually just like sketches and bits from the movie. but the songs are just phenomenal.
Yeah, one of the things that influenced this decision to cover Brain Candy was on Spotify, I got the theme song from Kids in the Hall in my Discover Weekly, and I'm like, I know this song. This song like speaks to me. I know this, but I couldn't remember where it was from. And then I'm like, well, I got to go look back and I'll figure it out. Like, I'll look at the band name.
I was way off on the name of the track, but I wanted to make sure that I got it in here. It's Having an Average Weekend. Yeah. Having an Average Weekend is the song that then gets edited down to be the theme song for Kids in the Hall. But just check it out. And pure instrumental. So like I can easily recommend it because it's just good music. There's no offensive lyrics. There's no chance that like you're gonna like hate the content in any way. It's literally just good, just surf rocks effects. Yeah.
Like just driving, having an average weekend is playing. I see that. I see the name of the band. I know this song. It's really bothering me. And then like I pull over because I'm driving. That's when I listen to music. I pull over to look at my actual Spotify, and it's off of the Brain Candy soundtrack. And I'm like, man, that was a really good movie. We should do it on the show. And so here we are. There's also that Muzak version of I wish I could, it's a Tragically Hip song. It's the one that plays in the elevator when Kevin McDonald as Chris Cooper is going to go up and present on Gleeman X. This is the first time we've said Gleeman X, and I'm sad that this is not a 4 episode because I would have called it the Gleeman X report. But don't worry, one of these reports where we don't know what to call it, I'm just going to title it the Gleeman X report. So look forward to that sometime in the future. But the song, one of the lyrics is, in my opinion, it's ready. And like that's where subtlety comes into it, because you hear that song and it's a Muzak version of it specifically because they're in an elevator, and then you have that moment when you're watching this movie, maybe like your second or third time watching the movie in a week to prepare to talk about it on your podcast, where you're like, oh my god, did Roritor play this music to influence his decision about the drug?
Yeah. Man.
Like
considering that he's the only one that seems to get approved and not the gives worms to ex-girlfriends guy.
It gives worms to ex-girlfriends. Could it give them to ex-boyfriends?
Could it give it to ex-boyfriends? You guys just don't get it.
My empire is crumbling!
There's so many great lines from this movie.
Sorry, it's really good. It's one of those. But that's just something good. But it is Brendan Fraser History Month, and we have just spent a lovely time celebrating Brendan Fraser and his history. But the world does keep turning. So before we go into the quiz portion of the show, Stephen, is there anything else that happened this week for you that you want to talk about and share?
I mean, like, a lot of my week was really focused on Kids in the Hall,
and that's understandable.
I'm not mad about that either. No, I've been diving into some sillier stuff. You and I have been talking about. I don't know if we've gotten a chance to talk about Vampire Survivor yet on the show, but like because of the conversation that the world is having about that game right now, and then you and I subsequently, I've just been leaning into a lot of smaller little indie style games that like kind of filling the gap right now for me. Like as far as like large release stuff goes, I don't know if there's anything like huge that I'm into or looking forward to at the moment. So because of that, I've been kind of diving into some other stuff. On the Switch itself, just to talk about like a full-fledged game that I've bought into, I just picked up Dicey Dungeons. Have you played that or heard of it?
No. I've heard of it, but I have not played it.
So it's a dungeon crawler. The way that it is, it's way too unique for me to be able to describe accurately on the show. I would encourage anybody to check it out, but the essential idea is like Yahtzee style. Like you roll dice and then like you use your dice to do certain moves, whether they're attacks, blocks, or all sorts of wild stuff that you can do. And I would encourage you to check it out because the art style is very fun. I want to call it unique, but somebody out there is going to point out like 5 or 6 kids shows that probably use it, but it is very reminiscent of that. It feels like it's tapping into that for me. So it feels like Saturday morning cartoons while I'm playing it. And then on top of that, the sensibilities of the game are amazing because you start off by playing as a warrior figure. So very straightforward rules. You roll dice. High numbers means you hit hard. Good. You want high dice. The end, right? Like that's how the basic mechanics are laid out to you. But then immediately the next character that gets unlocked for you that you have to play with in order to kind of continue the game forward, you have to play with the thief character, and it completely upends the game. Suddenly you're looking for the lowest rolls possible. You're trying to figure out ways that you can sneak more dice onto the board, and suddenly you can do more things like that. It just completely changes the way you play it. And then the next character introduces a whole new other mechanic because you play as this robot character and you have to actually build up CPU power in order to do anything. It's fucking wild the ways in which that game is willing to throw everything you know out the window within a moment's notice, but also at the end of the day, you're still just rolling dice to just kind of move the game along. So very, very cool and a very small. I think it was only like $15, and it was on sale earlier this week. I don't know if it still is, but a $15 buy-in on what has already given me 6 hours worth of fun and like more to come. Really cool, but just like small shit like that. Like you've been playing Vampire Survivor a lot. I've been playing that. I've been diving into some browser demos for some stuff. Just going to throw it out there right now. Backpack Hero is just like taking over my workday. Like I'll have it running in the background as I'm taking phone calls, and it's very easy for me to duck in and out of. And I need a game like that right now, and it's been very cool to have that available. And that's available through a browser demo. So just look up Backpack Hero and you'll find that. like little shit like that has kind of filled the gaps between me working and watching Kids in the Hall to prepare for today.
Nice. No, that's excellent. I mean, Vampire Survivors, I have immensely enjoyed my time with it. I have completed all 96 achievements that are currently available in the game.
Jeez, nice, man.
And
seriously, that is awesome. That is fantastic.
Well, what really does it is I completed the 88 that were available in the patch that I initially downloaded, which was the day we did our Superbad episode.
Nice.
The reason why I was late, no, well, not Superbad, sorry. It was Ridiculous Six, which also, there's an Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe episode out there where we cover the Ridiculous Six. If you're interested in a break from Brendan Fraser, it's a nice reminder. We do another show, we talk about Adam Sandler stuff. So it was for the Ridiculous Six recording. The reason I was late to that recording was because I had downloaded Vampire Survivors and was like,
know what you were getting into.
Yeah, one more game. I can do one more game before we have to record at 9:00. And then, oh, Siege, I'm an idiot. I'll be there at 9:30.
I'm having a good run. I can't be there right now.
So it's just one of those situations where it's so since that. So I think that was like maybe the 4th that I downloaded that game.
Yeah.
I wanted to complete the game with all of the achievements that were available, because I was nervous that if I were to update, because they did an update last Sunday, it would change the game some ways. And I just want to say, regarding the development philosophy of the guy in charge of Vampire Survivors, and we'll do a Vampire Survivors like episode proper.
I was gonna say we're gonna have to talk about this for real after May, because like it is something that has really hit really big. Not just between you and me, but like it's hit the rest of the world.
It's having a moment
wildly.
right now. So that's how it came into my life and why I'm seeing it. But I kind of don't want to give it that until it's out of early access, because it's an early access game by all accounts.
Right.
And it's $3. So if you have a computer that can run it, I would recommend like a pretty solid graphics card, not one of those ones that you're gonna have to scalp for $2,000. But maybe if you can do like 120 hertz at 60 frames,
and
1080.
The bigger thing about people are going to see like stills from it or watch people play it and try and figure out why the hell you're saying that. And it's not that the graphics like in a bubble are that intensive. It is it reminds me of the Dead Rising philosophy. The problem is that you end up with so much shit going on screen at some point that like this is the problem I'm running into playing it on my computer. Is it's not the first 5 minutes of playing that game, it's everything after that. Once there's so much shit happening on screen, my computer just starts like humming like a fucking beast, and it's just janky as shit and like just staticky, and like suddenly I'm getting like 3 frames a second. It's nuts. Like the amount of shit that ends up on screen at some point is just so intensive that you need to have something that can handle that. But if you've got that, then there's no reason to not drop $3 to play this game.
Yeah, it's $3 on Steam, and it's worth those $3. And honestly, if you go play the demo that's on itch.io and you enjoy it, don't keep playing the demo on itch.io, because you can't bring your progress over. So if it appeals to you after you play the demo, spend the $3 and get the full experience that is still constantly being updated. Because before we recorded today, I sat down, I updated my game, and I got those remaining 8 achievements to get to 96. And that was fun. Like, that was a really fun way to do it. And I can't wait to jump back into the game. And like, there's a secret character I still haven't unlocked, even though I've unlocked like the big daddy of them all with the Mask of the Red Death. So nice. It's just a really good time. But I want to, once it's a completed game, I think we'll give it like an actual episode. Plus we're in the middle of Brendan Fraser History Month. But it is, if you're looking for something like, it's a perfect kind of come down from something like Elden Ring.
Yeah,
where that was like this huge, crazy game. That's like, it's a small game. It's very reminiscent of arcade games in that any round can only take maximum 30 minutes. So that's nice.
Yeah, I mean, literally, if this was in front of me with a fucking like fight stick and a couple of buttons, and I was pumping quarters into it, I wouldn't stop. Like I could see it being played that way, and I'm glad it's not, because man, the amount of money I would lose on this game would be immense.
Yeah, it makes me sad that arcades are not what they were before, because a arcade version of this game would be a huge like moneymaker.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's a huge buy-in, but man, if somebody wanted to make one and throw it in Dave and Buster's somewhere,
Buster's, yeah,
like, I would be so happy.
Yeah, it'd be wonderful. It'd be like playing Fruit Ninja at Dave & Buster's, which is weird. There's one other thing that's going on in the world, and we're a show about everything, and we're gonna look at it through the lens of how we usually look at things on the Say Report. So like, I'm sorry for what we're about to talk about.
The pop culture and the ways in which it's influenced this for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But currently we're living in a world where a draft has been leaked that the Supreme Court wants to overturn Roe versus Wade, which is the court case, the landmark court case that makes abortion a legal avenue in the United States of America. And it's really scary what that could represent for people.
Right, because as others have pointed out before us, but we should point out here, it's not just it is about abortion, and it's fucking stupid that this is even still a question. But on top of that, it's about people's rights with their bodies in general, women's rights with their bodies in general, and the ways in which that has actually been the grounding for a lot of stuff over the last 30 years about like why, you know, gay marriage has been allowed and things like that. Like there's a lot of other things that kind of were built on the cornerstone of Roe versus Wade that are now kind of up in the air now that that cornerstone's been or possibly will be removed.
Yeah, that has been wiggled. It hasn't been pulled out of the Jenga tower, but it's definitely been played with a little bit, and it's scary. It's scary what the tower would come tumbling down.
I mean,
really.
Especially with shaky hands,
yeah.
Kavanaugh. Like, no thanks, man.
Yeah. So it's a thing, but how we're going to talk about it on this show is one of the things that I have seen constantly on social media is people sharing information about Dirty Dancing and saying, I bet you don't remember that abortion that takes place in Dirty Dancing. To which my argument is, no, that abortion is the driving force of the movie Dirty Dancing.
All right, here's a Dirty Dancing secret from Sajin. He's only ever watched this movie in its entirety as an unedited film once. Yes, I've caught portions of it on TV since that time and before that time and all that. But like, Dirty Dancing as a film is not a movie I am invested in the ways that some people are, you know, and like we're probably gonna have the same conversation in a few weeks when Maverick finally drops and we talk about Top Gun as well. But like, it is a movie that I am aware of because of its pop culture like existence. But other than that, it does not mean much to me. The idea that somebody out there forgot that abortion was part of the story to me is absurd, because like that is the story of Dirty Dancing.
It is the inciting. It's the story of Dirty Dancing. Baby wants to get the money to help Penny, who is a dancer at the Catskills Resort her and her family are staying with, get an abortion at a time, because it's set in the 50s, even though it releases in the 80s. It is set in the 50s at a time where abortion is not legal or safe or even like something that people go out and do the way that they are able to with Roe versus Wade having been its landmark decision. So Baby gets that money, and then the problem is, well, now we have the money, but Penny can't go because the only day that the guy is going to be available to perform the procedure, she has to go work at the Sheldrake Motel. So then Baby, Frances, steps up and says, fine, I will dance for Penny so that she can be taken care of it. I mean, Baby, the character of Baby, Frances, I can't think of her last name right now, and I'm actually really mad about that. She's like a feminist character whose ultimate goal is to one day be on the Supreme Court. So the fact that like the movie, it releases in the 80s. I think it's like an 88. I feel like it's 85 to 88. I don't know.
87.
It's 87?
Yep.
Well, that's between 85 and 88. So, I mean,
no, yeah,
I don't feel bad.
Got it.
So 87. So we're currently living in Ronald Reagan's America in the 80s. As we have seen in 2022, Republicans have always kind of been trying to find a way to overturn Roe versus Wade because of all these other things that are able to be built upon it. So making a movie that is not just like pro-abortion in 1987, but then like making it a period piece in the 50s to show how bad it was before that happened. Like this is a bit of propaganda that is trying to show that this is an important part of our country at the time. So it getting boiled down to social media posts of like, bet you didn't remember there's an abortion in Dirty Dancing.
I mean, like, there are straight up conversations between her and her father because her father is a conservative doctor. Like, it's just fucking wild.
I don't know. You say her father's a conservative doctor. I'm pretty sure he's an abortion doctor.
Well, but that he's a conservative wasn't the right word to use in this context.
Yeah.
But he is a 1950s older white male who is a doctor in this area. So like he is in a position to have some very interesting, conflicting conversations about this, and the movie utilizes that. Like, it is not ignored. You know, this is a film that I like. It hurts a little bit to hear that because what it means is that all anybody ever thinks that movie is about the two of them dancing.
They had the time of their life. Yeah,
it's like it's not. That's like movies are more than.
Yeah, sometimes movies have messages, and this movie has a pretty huge message about how, for a working class person like Penny, having a child will completely upend her life and ruin her opportunities. But then also, the person who got her pregnant, Robbie, fuck you, Robbie, like, he is, I guess spoilers for Dirty Dancing, which we have established is 35 years old.
Yeah.
Is one of those situations where, like, Robbie is a waiter at the same Catskills resort, but he's also going to college. He represents a higher class of person. And so the fact that he won't pay to get this procedure done, right? Because she goes to him and he's like, go fuck yourself, which is why it's down to Jennifer Grey's character to get that money for who is essentially a stranger, because she doesn't want her life to be ruined because of one mistake. Like, it's
I mean, so it's written by a woman who, I'm not going to say it's autobiographical, but it is based on her experiences with having a father that was a doctor in that time period, and the ways in which that, you know, that led to these kinds of moments and these conversations and these revelations that about the health side of this whole debate, right? And like, that is a huge part of it. And when I say, like, there's that moment in the movie where her dad finds out that Robbie is the one responsible and that he's going to use the money for this thing, and he does kind of like take the money back, right? Am I misremembering that?
Okay, so
eventually he comes around to like making sure to not do that, but I thought that was like part of it. But remind me.
So the thing is that, like, he's initially upset that Baby takes $200 from her father to pay for Penny's abortion, and she says, "I'll pay you back, but I have a friend who's in trouble." And they use all of the frickin' like innuendo for somebody being pregnant in the 50s, and like that really hits you in just terms of like, that's how it was talked about.
Yeah,
like, an unwed mother is that she's in trouble. One of my friends is in trouble and she needs this money. So her father gives her the $200 because it's not a situation where she can say, "Dad, I have a friend who needs an abortion." But if she could, I'm like 97% sure that Jerry Orbach's character, that's something that he does for people in the movie, because of the fact that after Penny gets the abortion, the guy does not do a good job. Like, she is damaged after the surgery. Like, right. It was not clean in any way, shape, or form. And that is where Jerry Orbach comes into it and is then made aware of what is going on. And he grabs his doc bag and he goes and he tends to Penny. And it's his usage of the term of like, "I wish you had just told me that what this was for. Otherwise she wouldn't have been subjected to that butcher." Which to me says, this guy might have been willing to help this girl out.
Yeah, I don't know. It is purposely vague because there is that element to it. There is also the side of it where he maybe feels like this wouldn't have been done, so then this wouldn't be happening. So there is also this like weird like element to it where he feels like this is it is an admission that this is happening at a level where it is not regulated or being done properly, and so people are getting hurt. And so whether or not your conclusion from that is we need to legalize it so that people can have this done safely and correctly, or your conclusion from that is this should just be a thing just not being done, it leaves it kind of up in the air about that. So I
don't know. I've always read it as
and it's an interesting read that I had just not considered. But just be aware that not everybody would read it that way.
No, I understand that.
Some people may not.
Yeah, but it's more the fact that like he's upset about the care that she received. He even has the line where he's like, "I don't give a shit about the money. I wish you just told me what it was for." Because maybe if that's not something he does, he could put her in touch with somebody.
Yeah, he's in the medical field.
Yeah,
right?
Like,
yeah.
But it's the fact that he's able to treat it the way that he is. Like, it's not, doctors still had specialized types of medicine in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very big part of something like MASH, which is Vietnam at the same amount of in the same time period, where like those guys, some of them are specialists and they're just over there doing meatball surgery. And like the fact that like one of them is a chest doctor. Oh my freaking God, really? Because we have a chest injury that we need fixed. Or like a brain surgeon. Like there were still specializations in the field of doctoring. So either her father
as long as doctoring is, as long as medical doctoring has existed, specialization has been part of it.
So like it's not just something like if he's just a pediatrician, he's not 100% ready to treat somebody who had a botched abortion, which is not. Like Penny is the child is terminated in the movie, like, so that whole thing goes away. But then the other part where you were talking about Robbie, to get back on track, because it just incenses me that like it's the whole point of the movie, and then like
anything that's not about the dancing is about this conversation. And even then the dancing becomes about this because of how hypersexualized a lot of what's going on with the dirty dancing is. It is a conversation about the idea that like, is this kind of the thing that got Penny into the situation to begin with? And this conversation about how he like maybe like that's the dangerous part about her doing it. Like it is why the dancing is dirty.
It's and the dancing by 80s standards is not very dirty.
Right.
It's strange. And I mean, like the whole other thing is that
women passed out when Elvis fucking just twisted his legs.
That's
so
true.
like that idea of like what was considered dirty is
Siegel's not wrong. Siegel's not wrong. But then another plot line is that Robbie character is seeing baby's sister. Like they're dating, and she's like, I'm going to give myself to Robbie. And then like the fact that baby's like, maybe don't do that because he's a piece of shit. Like, but the whole thing is that Jerry Orbach, her father, believes that Johnny Castle, played by Patrick Swayze, rest in power, King, he is the one who got Penny into trouble. And they don't want to blow up Robbie's spot, who is their waiter at the resort. So at the end of the thing, as is customary at resorts, Jerry Orbach tips Robbie because he was their waiter, and then he includes a little bit extra so that, you can go on to be a lawyer, right? That you have a good last senior year of college. I've added a little bit extra for you. And then, when Johnny Castle comes and they do the whole time of your life dance, and then Johnny Castle is like, this is the whole thing. You need to treat your daughter. Nobody puts baby in the corner. And then Jerry Orbach realizes, oh, Johnny Castle's actually not the asshole. Fucking Robbie is. Because Robbie tells him. Robbie's like, hey, thanks for taking care of Penny, doctor. And he takes the money from him like, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
You garbage human being.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so baked into the plot of that movie that like to not remember that is a tacit admission that you just haven't really watched the movie. It's just the dancing that you like, and maybe that's what these people are trying to point out is like maybe sometimes we forget that this has been a conversation for this long and to the point where now
forest for the trees,
right, and in that regard, I wouldn't be upset when people point that out, but like anybody out there that reacts to it, that's just like, yeah, it's such a small part. Like, no, like that is
it's the whole movie. The whole movie is essentially this. This is what abortion was like pre Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, well, so to the larger conversation, right, and the ways in which this just kind of mirrors what this is a movie from 1987 that is having this conversation, and we are still having it in 2022, and like that is where we're at, people. So anybody and this idea that just 2 years ago when we were looking at, or 3 years ago when we were looking at putting a new Supreme Court member on the bench, and they were being asked this stuff about Roe versus Wade, and some people were just like, it's settled law. It's settled law. Why are we having this conversation? We know that that they're not going to do anything about it. And now it's like surprise Pikachu face. Suddenly something is on the table about it. Like we've been talking about this for literally 25 years. Like this is never gone away. This has been a huge part of this, and we've never stopped this conversation. And people have tried to tell us for years to calm down, to chill on it, because it's not a big deal anymore. But yet here we are. We find ourselves in this position again, and it's why it's important that movies like Dirty Dancing get made. And it sucks that some people kind of forget that that is like what the art of that actual film is, as much as like the art of dancing is definitely on display in that movie. The spine of that film is about this very particular issue. Like, we forget that we can use film, we can use dance, we can use this art as conversation about this darker issue. I mean, like we talked about it with Brain Candy, like the ways in which you can use this stuff to talk about larger issues at play in society. Like, that's the whole thing, man. That's the whole point of all of this.
Yeah. So don't let marketing get in the way of that, because Dirty Dancing, since its release, they have only tried to remind you of the dancing portions, which are maybe 15% of that movie, like that. And the other scary thing is that, unlike Francis Houseman, the discussion of abortion and abortion rights in the United States of America is anything like the wind. All right. So, any further thoughts, Sejim, to go from there?
No, let's roll into our back end here, because we've got our quiz to give, right?
Yep, it's round 3 of the big quiz of Brendan Fraser. So Will be here for another round where we get to know Brendan Fraser just a little bit better. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the other side. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devin Decker, and legally I have to tell you that it was all me that is responsible for the choice of Kids in the Hall Brain Candy. Sejin would not let us continue with the Brendan Fraser quiz of Brendan Fraser if I did not say for the record that this was all me.
And I will say that I do feel bad, because your shoulder must hurt from how hard you were shoving this to fit in.
You know what? It's not. Here's the thing. There's only so many Brendan Fraser films. Even with him having, like, I think it's 6 films in production right now on IMDb, and all of his TV credits and everything that he's done, there's only a finite amount of content. And as much as I would love to just record a Monkey Bone episode every Brendan Fraser History Month, eventually we're gonna have to diversify a little bit. And, you know, Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe, the thing that I am so afraid of with the Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe is when we run out of Adam Sandler films.
No, because then we'll finally be free from this prison.
I know, but at that point, I feel like I'll be institutionalized and I won't know what to do. I'll be like Brooks at the end of Shawshank Redemption, which would also be a really good Smurfs remake. The Smurfshank Redemption? I can see it now.
The Shaw Smurf? No, the Smurfshank. No, the Smurf
Smurfshin. Yes, I'm institutionalized, but like with Brendan Fraser History Month, we celebrate it every May. So eventually we're going to have to do those ones that Brendan Fraser is in, but you know, I mean, you just saw the movie and you just heard us talk about it. I don't need to keep going on and on and on, because this is the Brendan Fraser quiz of Brendan Fraser. We have someone else here who is just as important, nay, more important, based on what we're doing.
Yeah, because he talks to us.
Hi, guys. I'm Brendan Fraser.
Oh, my God, Brendan Fraser! You sound like our friend Will.
I'm doing an accent for the show. It's the thing I do sometimes.
I bet you learned how to do such a flawless British accent working with Rachel Weisz in The Mummy and The Mummy Returns.
No, it was definitely Elizabeth Hurley.
Curveball. It was Ciarán McKellen. Who knew?
Ooh.
All love interests.
And obviously, Ian was my favorite.
Honestly, I would have thought it was Don Cheadle in Crash, but that's just me. Is Don Cheadle in Crash, or am I just an asshole right now?
I actually don't want to correct you. I'm going to let the internet take care of this one, just for you.
I'm 80% sure you're correct. And that may go down.
Notice how Sejin didn't put a number on this.
Oh, mine's it could go down. It's more like 70 now.
Now I gotta check and see if Don
Yeah,
Cheadle's
someone needs to Google.
Someone needs to figure it out. Otherwise, it'll cast a pallor on what we're doing here. And what are we doing here? We always do a Brendan Fraser quiz. We always do a quiz about Brendan Fraser to celebrate Brendan Fraser History Month. Because going back to the very first Brendan Fraser History Month, this all started with a quiz I sent to Sejan's house in a pretty much unmarked envelope.
Yeah. By the way, we're all on the racist clear. Don Cheadle is the number one person.
Yeah, he's definitely in...
Yeah, he's definitely in that movie. I can see him now.
And he's weirdly British in Ocean's 11. And we talked about Ocean's 13 earlier this year. It all synergizes. Just like the synergy of doing Kids in the Hall Brain Candy, the week after the Kids in the Hall Season 6 premiered on Amazon Prime. I swear Jeff Bezos is not giving us any money.
Just smile and nod. No, it's all about Daddy Musk now. Daddy Bezos is out.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think synergizes is a word, just to circle back. Apart from that,
look, it's an American concept.
Was that a Freudian slip there, Will?
Which one? The circling back or the synergizing?
You said circle black.
Oh, no, he didn't.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, that's what you... Like crystal clear audio from all the way down under.
Oh my gosh! If only this were recorded so we could check. Let us know afterwards at the Say Report on Twitter if Will said circle black or circle back.
Did you guys remember Tony Danza was in Crash? I forgot that.
Yeah, Tony Danza is definitely because it's Brendan Fraser History Month. But yeah, every Brendan Fraser History Month since the first, there is the ceremonial quiz, and as Brendan Fraser History Month has grown bigger than itself, honestly, and Brendan Fraser has put the work in and had his renaissance, we have honored the man, not just by discussing his large bulk of work, but with the ceremonial quiz. But now that the month is so big, it's a whale of its own, we decided that we would do the quiz in small digestible chunks so that you could have a quiz every week in Brendan Fraser History Month. So we're in round 3, and Will, as the Master of Ceremonies, why don't you take it from here?
All right. So we are back with round 3. We started with round 1, which was kind of a welcome to Brendan Fraser, which, I thought you guys would do better on, but that one finished 1 to Devon, a half to Sejan. We then moved into round 2. Just round 1. You did well. I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
Round 2 came flowing straight back in with a fill in the blanks of the Brendan quotes. Some beautiful philosophy from the man
himself. Fill in the Fraser. But it's PH. It's spoken, so.
Oh my God.
It's hard to see.
So proud of the pun, Will. You have to give it to him.
Apologies.
Well, when you score 5 points and I only score 2 points, you can dictate how proud I am of the pun.
That's fine. Just supple at the teeth. Yes, more. Yeah.
Thank you, Daddy Musk. But anyway, so we are currently sitting at 6 to Devon, 2.5 to Sejan after the 2 rounds. We are now rolling into round 3. It's another get to know Brendan quiz.
Great.
Okay.
I'm hoping you guys these are good for learning.
Getting to know.
And also, hopefully, sometimes you can show off your knowledge of the big man himself.
I'm excited.
I'm excited too. Afton Smith joke.
Great callback.
I'm sure they're a lovely person. I really don't want to be mean to Afton Smith.
I don't know anything about Afton Smith.
I do.
Well, next, when you start the Afton Smith cinematic universe, then you will know.
Ooh, exciting.
Spin-off of a spin-off. It's going to be good. They never fail.
Spin-off of a spin-off in an alternate universe.
We live in the time of Better Call Saul. I don't know if we can really...
Yeah, fair enough.
Everybody on Twitter is saying that Better Call Saul is better than Breaking Bad, but I refuse to watch Breaking Bad, and I don't know what that means for Better Call Saul. I love Bob Odenkirk, though, and we're going to celebrate him a little bit later on in the year, but we'll get there when we get there. Yours again, Will. Apologies.
Oh, no. Oh, good.
I'm starting to realize why I thought he married Alicia Silverstone.
Is it because Afton Smith kind of looks like Alicia
I mean, if you
Silverstone.
told me that she was Alicia Silverstone's older sister, I'd believe you.
Is Afton Smith the one who played? It isn't, because her name was Rachel in the Clueless TV show. The person who played Cher Horowitz. It was like
I bet you
Rachel
they.
Brosnahan.
I
They?
don't know.
I
Afton Smith. I'm trying to figure out when they met because she's in Georgia the Jungle.
They
okay.
met at Winona
They met at Winona
Riders.
Riders in 1998.
No,
Well, they got
because
married
she's
in
in Georgia.
98.
Yeah, they got married at Winona Riders in '98, so they might have met on Georgia the Jungle in '97, '96.
Okay. I don't know. I know literally nothing about Afton Smith other than the fact that they were married to Brendan Fraser from 98 to 2007.
Also appeared in Fried Green Tomatoes, or Tomatoes, wherever you're from.
Kathy Bates is in that movie, I assume.
Reality Bites, A Reason to Believe, George of the Jungle.
Suddenly
and then
I
Dickie Roberts, former
Suddenly,
child star.
that's great because they're both in Dickie Roberts' former child star.
She
No,
plays
no, no.
herself
He's in Joe
uncredited.
Dirt. I don't know. I've never seen any of those Dennis Spade movies.
Yeah, Dennis Spade would really be upset
Dennis-
about that.
Him and Tom
Wellington
will be devastated.
Dennis Spade and Tom Wellington.
Wait, is that not Dennis? Oh, his name is David Spade.
David.
Dennis was his name on Just Shoot Me. Oh, I am just batting 1,000 tonight. All I did was eat. You know what? It's that crazy blue drink that I had.
I
Yeah,
can't
it's the
wait
blue
until
drink.
they make their Bert and Costello movie together.
And as you guys have warmed up, let's get into the quiz.
Wonderful.
All right, question number 1. Which of his many British co-stars and general heroes said, "I wish one day to be as good as actor as Brendan is"?
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
That's high praise. I have no idea what to write down here.
There's a few people I think it actually could be, but I'm gonna swing big for Brendan's sake. I'm gonna swing big.
I'm going to go with the one that makes me sad to write it down.
Because you can't spell it, or?
No, because their story makes me sad.
Okay.
And I have a pop figure of them in the basement. In honor
It
of
sounded
them.
happier in the second half of your sentence there.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I really like them. I'm playing the pronoun game so that maybe I'm not giving Siege in any of it. But
I've already wrote an answer down. So
All right, good.
you're good.
Excellent.
I also have an answer.
You have the
Yeah,
correct
You have
answer.
the correct answer, yeah.
I definitely have an answer. All right. Question number 2. Which second language is Brendan fluent in?
Ooh.
Weasel.
The Weasel. I really want to watch Biodome, but I'm sad that it's not available for streaming anymore. It used to be
I'm sad
free
that it's
on
got the
Hulu.
bad Baldwin in it.
The worst Baldwin. Let's be honest.
First of all, the ball.
Well, is he the worst Baldwin now? I mean, with everything
I
that
don't
happened
know,
with
Danny.
Alan.
Hey, Alec was in a terrible
I said
situation.
Alan too. Just I
Yeah,
messed
I know,
that up
you're
all over the
fully.
place tonight.
This is not going well.
Yeah, with what happened with Alec, it was a bad situation with Alec Baldwin. I don't know if that. I mean, Stephen Baldwin definitely the worst Baldwin because of his political connections. That's all I have to say
Judas.
about that.
He's like a worse Kevin Sorbo, which is like how
How was that even possible?
My favorite Baldwin is Adam Baldwin, who isn't part of the family, but
I like Billy
He's kind of a
Baldwin.
prick too, though.
he was great in Chuck, and everyone knows I love Chuck.
Adam Baldwin.
Everybody was great, Chuck.
It is very surprising to me that he's not part of the Baldwins, because if you put them all together in a room, he would look like part of the family.
Isn't he like a cousin or something? We're not doing this. What are we doing? Let's go back to the
Hey, question number 3. Hey, there's 3 points available for this question.
Ooh, look at that.
Oh.
Huey, Dewey, and
Oh, yeah.
Louie.
Here we go. Which 3 pretty essential body parts has Brendan had major surgery on, all due to him doing his own stunts?
Jeez.
I'd say we've mentioned 2 of them
Wow.
in the course of our conversations so far.
Well, not
And then-
proud,
and then
but I
pick a
gotta
third.
write it down.
I have
It's
to
not-
remember.
It's not urethra. I'll give you that right away.
Oh, damn it. That's good, because I wasn't sure how to spell urethra.
I mean, not that I know of. I didn't.
Is the
Go that
loincloth
deep.
an essential part of the body?
Some would
I mean, it's
argue
an
no. They're called
essential clothing.
nudists.
Yes, and as a never nude, it's very essential.
That's nice. Last time we're talking about Bob Odenkirk. This time we're talking about Dave Cross. Actually, it was all this episode. I'm an idiot.
Oh, this last time, a few minutes ago, we talked about Bob.
Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, right? Right.
Exactly. And Sennon's got away from you there.
Bill Odenkirk, Bob Odenkirk's brother.
One of the Baldwins. No, wait.
Which Baldwin? Did we name every Baldwin? Billy, Steve, Alec, Danny? Yeah.
Isn't Danny Baldwin the other one?
Yeah, there's definitely
Daniel.
Danny Baldwin.
I think it might be
Daniel
Daniel.
Baldwin is what he goes by. I'm a big fan of that movie with Kim Basinger. That's just Cobra, but it's like a remake of Cobra based more on the book. What's the name of that movie?
I thought you were going to say John Carpenter's Vampires, because that's got I believe Daniel Baldwin in it, and James Woods. Weird movie.
Yeah, I don't.
Oh, James Woods.
James Woods from Rhode Island, Warwick, Rhode Island.
How much further away from this quiz can we get?
Hey, so question 4.
Sejan, thank you for keeping us on topic.
You're doing well. I'm proud of you. I feel you might get a bonus point for keeping us on topic.
Yes.
Brown noser.
Question
Proud of it.
4. How many children does Brendan Fraser have? With Afton Smith, as we talked about.
Oh no! Wait.
None with Alicia Silverstone, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say like 6, thinking it was with multiple people. I mean, I guess it could still be 6 with Afton, but that seems unfair. I don't know.
But it's how many biological children Brendan Fraser has, right? Known biological children, like illegitimate bastards that are out there from the Airheads
You don't
press
count.
junket. Thank you for that.
They are not.
I would really like to know why everybody thinks my father is Canadian. For so long, people thought I was Bryan Adams' illegitimate son.
I thought you were Alan Thicke.
Well, again, it's always a Canadian.
It's a Canadian. Wayne Gretzky was around. It happens.
Hey, you could be a Sarwick. Jeff Sarwick was a very famous Canadian hockey player.
There's a bunch of Canadians called Will Fournier. So who knows?
I'm fairly certain Dennis Decker is my father.
I know. All the Wills I know.
These are the Wills I know. These are the Wills I know. Will Smith. I'll keep his wife's name out of my mouth.
God.
I mean, luckily her name isn't Will, but thank God.
I don't have to include her. As I would be by the
Dude,
laws of
how
song.
weird. Can we talk about how big a flex it is that IMDb TV's movie of the month is Shark Tale in the wake of everything that went down?
It had to be that or Madagascar, surely.
Oh man, what's question 5?
That's at a funeral.
Hey, question
the
5.
Neil LaBute one.
Oh, the Neil LaBute Death at a Funeral. My favorite Neil LaBute directed film.
Hey, question 5.
Yay, look at that.
What first does Brendan hold as an American-born but Canadian heritage actor?
Ooh, that's I'm gonna go with this. Yeah. I'll take it.
Confident sounds from Devin Decker.
I'm taking a guess. You know, this is more fun than the first one. I will say that straight up.
Oh, what's wrong with the first one? It's just because you're upset about Afton Smith the whole time.
No, I didn't know any of them. The scores were 1 point to half a point.
Oh, I don't think I know any of these either. Was that supposed to change this time around?
No, but these are like more fun questions.
I think he just likes us more now, Will.
Yeah, I think he's just grown into it a bit. All right, to round off round 3 with question number 6. Which 2 other Pauly Shore movies was Brendan Fraser played a character called Link in?
Yes! Finally! My obsessive compulsion pays off.
I think I did that right.
If you wrote down 2 movies, you did it right.
Ah, shit. Wait. No, I'm good.
Excellent.
All right, that comes to the end of round 3, the second of the Get to Know Brendan quizzes.
I'm
I
getting
don't like
to know
the movie
Brendan.
Pauly Shore is Dead because it's based on a lie.
What you really need to understand is that Pauly Shore was not dead.
The Aristocrats.
The aristocrat. Sucking and fucking.
All right, let's do this thing.
All right, let's put these people out of their misery with some answers. Question 1. Which of his British co-stars and all-round hero once said, "I wish one day to be as good an actor as Brendan"?
All
Had to be
around.
Ian McKellen, right?
I missed the all around hero line. So I wrote Elizabeth Hurley.
Could still be.
She's a hero, but Sejan takes an early lead. Sir Ian McKellen did say, "I wish one day to be as good an actor as Brendan."
It sounds like a really nice thing that Ian McKellen would definitely say about a person.
It's also
Yeah, I
something
feel like
could
he's just a lovely person.
I could totally believe him saying that. Another A-list British actor, by the way, to
Indeed,
call back to way
reference
off-topic conversation.
An off-topic conversation that was not recorded on a podcast that Sejan wasn't there for. But apart from that, yes, definite A-list British celebrity.
Who would you
Question.
name as an A-list British celebrity, Sejan?
Probably Sting. Yeah, Sting.
Gordon Sumner? Gordon
Yeah,
Sumner is your
Gordon
go-to?
himself.
I mean, you know, pay the man his respects. He has a chosen name. I'm just saying.
I like his real name, though. Plus, and we talked about it in B-Movie, this is a lot of callbacks and references, this
Yeah, but
quiz.
Gordon Sumner doesn't sound like a guy that takes a while to fuck, you know? Like,
Actually,
you get it-
he
you get
does.
it-
Gordon Sumner sounds like he takes a longer time to fuck than Sting. Sting feels like he's in there and then he's dead.
Yeah. Okay, what
feel-
are we doing next?
Gordon Sumner sounds like the guy. It takes him a long time to get there, but then when he's in,
But then it's over.
yeah, it's like oh.
Every
It's the
breath
little-
you take.
He absolutely loves foreplay.
Okay.
And
I made a
then-
fantastic historical French joke and nobody heard it, so let's move on.
Every move you make.
Question 2. What second language is Brendan fluent in?
Oh, thank God. I could not read my writing, and
So,
I thought I wrote
not to-
Madonna.
Not to be racist, but I said German.
I wrote Mandarin, but it's probably French because he's Canadian.
Yes, it is indeed French. Canadian.
I
So
will-
German and Mandarin, very useful, but not the answer.
I did write. I thought I wrote Madonna, which like says that like Vogue, Virgin,
That was
True Blue, Papa, Preach. Don't. All right.
okay. Question 3.
Cocaine.
3 points available. Which 3 pretty essential body parts has Brendan had major surgery on due to him doing his own stunts?
Nose, dick, knees.
Foot, spine, hands.
This is the weirdest cheerleading chant I've ever heard. No sick knees.
Not
And
nose
Devin-
dick. It's not like it's not
Nose
some
dick.
Dan Aykroyd shit up here, but like nose
Sorry,
slash
nose,
dick, slash
trauma, knees.
Nose, dick, knees and dick, knees and dick.
Oh, you're repeating dick. Interesting.
No, I said foot. You had to repeat something.
nose, dick, knees and taint, knees and taint.
Knees, taint.
I had knees and balls, but yeah, knees and taint goes.
Knees and balls works, and it's the same area that's covered by a loincloth. I said foot, spine, hand. Just
You get a point for spine.
yay!
Season, I'm afraid you get none for dick, knees, hands.
What?
He has also had a full knee replacement.
I said knees.
Sorry, you did say niche. You did that. The song threw me off. I was just thinking about dick too much. And the other one is he had to have his vocal cords realigned after, hanging himself accidentally.
Oh, yeah.
So if I had said neck, would that have counted?
I would have given you a half for neck.
Okay, but it's his vocal cords.
But it was technically his vocal cords because, talking's hard after that. Question number 4.
That's why he sounds like Seth Green after the 3rd season and no longer like Jason Biggs. Sorry. Continue.
Yes. Question 4. How many biological legitimate children does Brendan Fraser have? That's the question got reworded.
3!
You both saying 3?
Yes.
Wow, you both get a point.
Yeah. Yeah, one of them is named Holden after Holden Caulfield. I know that part.
I thought it was named Holden after Ben Affleck in Chasing Amy, because Ben Affleck and Brendan Fraser are good friends.
No, it's named Holden after the rebranding of Volkswagen in Australia to Holden Cars.
Ah, there you go. Yeah, it was the only thing it could have been.
Yeah, he's a big fan of Sydney. He did actually a quote that I was going to use. Said, "I'm a big fan of Vietnam and Sydney. I hope to get to work in those places one day."
And I'm like, who the hell is Vietnam? I know Sydney.
Yeah, he would love to work in Sydney.
Hello, Sydney. How's the wife? Good for us.
I'm not going to tempt fate, but Siege, and you're currently ahead.
You did it. You ruined it. But let's see what we got for the last 2.
All right.
Also, it's round 3.
It is round 3. So, I mean, ahead is a strong term across the board. You've also got a whole comeback episode to go. What first does he hold as an American-born but Canadian heritage actor?
First dual citizen to be Oscar nominated.
Oscar nomination for Best Actor.
I mean, very nice answers. And it's good that you went for the same thing. But he is actually the first American-born actor with a star on the Canadian Walk of Fame.
Ooh. Oh, whoa!
Actually, super interesting.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing. I was like, that's awesome.
You know what, guys? I think that the 3 of us should go visit the Canadian Walk of Fame. I didn't know one existed until just now.
You want to see your father's name in its star?
Well, I'm sure Bryan Adams and Brendan Fraser both have stars on the Canadian Walk of Fame.
And Alan Thicke. Don't forget Alan Thicke.
Yeah, right.
What if we got up there and there was a star that said Dennis Decker right next to Brendan Fraser?
It'd be incredible. And it would explain where my father was most of my childhood.
And if there isn't, can we get one?
I mean, we'd have to start working. What a crazy bit of vandalism that would be, to add my father's name in a star on the Canadian Walk of Fame. And the best part about vandalism in Canada is that they just make you clean it up and apologize.
I feel my only concern is, I mean, I could probably find someone here to make me a star with a name in it. I don't know if it'll meet my luggage limit to fly to Canada. It'll be heavy.
We'd have to find somebody in Canada. We need a man on the inside. We'd need Don Cheadle, honestly. Let's be honest about it. And his flawless British accent.
I feel like I've seen this movie, and I feel like Brendan Fraser turns on us at some point.
Because of we defaced his star in the Canadian Walk of Fame.
A heist movie with Don Cheadle was where I was getting at, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. More that as well. But
yeah.
I thought you were talking about that Stephen Sondheim movie he was in.
Yeah, this. Sunday in the Park with Cheadle.
I love Sunday in the Park with Cheadle. It's my favorite adaptation.
He'd bring a real good adaptation.
Good. I'm glad that we
the last one.
That last one.
I gotta get this one out of my system.
Which 2 Pauly Shore movies has Brendan Fraser played a character called Link?
So it's in the Army now.
And
for sure,
Son-in-Law.
okay? And Son-in-Law. Yeah.
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 2 points all around. Which brings us to the end of round 3 and a victory for Siegen, 4 points to 5.
Yeah.
I mean, you won 5-4, not 4-5. That'd be weird. But it's just the
we're playing by Canada rules. Everything is golf in Canada.
Yep,
except for golf.
Australia jokes with Will here, but no, we didn't go that route. No, we went the higher route.
Well, Brendan
Higher than us.
Fraser. So where do our scores fall at the end of 3 rounds, though, Will?
End of round 3, it is currently 10 to Devon, 7.5 to Sejan. All to play for in round 4.
Wonderful. So thank you very much for joining us on this episode of the Say Report, where I was completely and totally responsible for the topic being Kids in the Hall brain candy. I hope that you were able to find some enjoyment from this discussion about Kids in the Hall brain candy during Brendan Fraser History Month. If Twitter is still a thing, commiserate with Sejan at Siege versus the World.
Yeah, and if you want to wish Channing Tatum a happy birthday today, you can if you hit Devin up at Devin D. Decker.
That one I support. Channing Tatum, Step Up. Oh, Pony by Genuine. Ow, ow, bow, bow. I don't know. Freaking Magic Devin taking off his shirt, yeah. Bow, bow, wow. That's Pony by Genuine, right?
Okay, we need to end this episode now.
I don't think Magic Devon had the same ring to it.
No, it doesn't. It'd have to be Delightful Devon. Or something. Nice. I don't know.
I was thinking Deluxe.
Deluxe Devon. It'd be Devon Deluxe, though.
Yeah, no, that would be...
So the jokes are about to start getting mean, bros. We got to finish this episode.
On that bombshell.
On that one, Will, bring us home.
Oh, it's my turn again. We love it. Thank you very much for tuning in for another round of Brendan Fraser Trivia. As we say, the scores are 10 to 7.5 in favor of Devon. Tune in next week for the final part.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Seaton Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.